They wrote it in the laws, ink still bleeds, treating women like soil, just planting seeds. She's gone, brain dead, not even awake, but the state's got a claim, gonna plant its stake. Say it's God's will, say it's life they protect, but they ain't the ones feeling pain or neglect. From Texas to Georgia, they set the trap, rights roll back while they smile and clap. Gilead's here, this is true. Hey mega fools, they'll come for you too. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. This ain't pro-life, it's control and shame. They don't care if she's gone, just playing a game. Keep her hooked to machines, cold and still, just a vessel to them, not a human with will. No consent, no voice, no chance to resist, just laws in place, written with a clenched fist. Hospitals scared, judges playing God, bodies ain't temples, just stay on pods. Gilead's here, this is true. Hey mega fools, they'll come for you too. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. Bands in the dark, they don't care who it kills, sacking courts while they strip out all of your wills. But we'll fight back, march loud, burn bright, cause this ain't the end, it's the start of the fight. Gilead's here, ain't no grace, and those leopards are coming to eat your face. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. Not gonna be a baby incubator. Not gonna be a baby incubator.
Oh, baby. He said nobody who healthcare could be so complicated. The Obamacare debate was 6 months litigated. Years of med school debt got capitalized. Insurance claim forms so high they nearly capsized. But he wouldn't know the frustration of trying to get prior authorization. Everybody knew, the whole world knew, the doctors, the lawyers, the CBO crew. Oh, 30,000 pages of ready review. It wasn't a big secret, we knew. He said people don't realize Obama deported, but the porter-in-chief is what La Raza retorted. Obama went after the violent folks and felons, struck down the dishwashers and people picking melons. But Obama's argument shows that he's not very bright. If Obama made some wrongs, two wrongs don't make a right. Everybody knew, the whole world knew. Univision, AP, the fact check crew. Oh, acting all surprised that the sky is blue. It wasn't no secret, we knew. He asked who knew a virus could be so contagious. Virologist blinked at someone so outrageous. He was surprised at how many countries existed. No wonder when the virus spread, he the one who missed it. Spread them out, slit red in every deadly hue. World Health Memo said we already knew. Everybody knew, oh, the whole world knew. Oh, the lab coats, the leaders, and we were with the flu. Oh, the nations of the world, more than 192. It wasn't a big secret, we knew. You unveil oxygen like contraband air. Like 6 there. You sat down, claiming to discover chairs. War called money was his big surprise. Iraq has oil, can you believe your eyes? He said, we are divided, a surprise to no one thinking. And he was most surprised a Republican was Lincoln. Everybody knew, the whole world knew. The Christians, the Muslims, atheists, and the Jews. Like being shot, they have animals at the zoo. It wasn't a big secret. We knew. Everybody knew. Everybody knew. Everybody knew. Everybody knew.
Gather round, everyone, and I'll tell you a tale about an orange-faced buffoon who should be in a jail. When people say he's done something that goes beyond the pale, he will shake his head and give this answer without fail. A hoax, he says it's all a hoax. When at a press conference or with misspelled keystrokes, he says he tells no lies and that he never jokes. Confronted with the truth, he'll say it's all a hoax. A modern Don Quixote, he hates the windmills, claiming to protect the birds and whales he says they kill. But don't believe that story, it's really just a shill. He just did not want to see them wild golfing on Scottish hills. A hoax, he said it's all a hoax. When at a press conference or with misspelled keystrokes, changing a storm path with black marker strokes. Confronted with the truth, to say it's all a hoax. Casting mail-in ballots is something that he's done. Now he wants to ban them for each and every one. He claims it's for integrity in each election, but he won't believe the results unless it's him that's won. A hoax, he says it's all a hoax. When at a press conference or with misspelled keystrokes, they'll fool you with distractions like real sugar in Cokes. Confronted with the truth, you'll say it's all a hoax. He promised to release all the Epstein files that caused all the MAGA base to react with smiles. But how long has he put it off? It sure has been a while, and now he's calling this a hoax, protecting pedophiles. A hoax, he says it's all a hoax. When at a press conference or with misspelled keystrokes, he'll keep on gaslighting up until he croaks. Confronted with the truth, he'll say it's all a hoax.
Trump piled debt, trillions tall. Promised Mexico would fund that wall. Praised dictators, said they're strong. Had Joe done it, they'd say he's wrong. Had Biden done it, MAGA would flip. Had Biden done it, whole numbers would slip. Had Biden done it, they'd scream foul play. But Trump did it, so it must be okay. disappears. What they call treason, if chosen name, is patriotism when Donald's to blame. Had Biden done it, I don't flip. Had Biden done it, more numbers than slip. Had Biden done it, then shout no way. But Trump did it, so it must be okay.
Self-proclaimed king, a groper in chief, stealing our country, a crooked orange thief. Faux patriots who are poorly educated, wearing red hats and also unvaccinated. Liberal Dan will see us through. It's the best show that you're not listening to. So when you hear the call, animals unite. Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right. A failing media that's barely treading water. They're too inept to fight this new world order. Corporate pigs are at the trough. Hear the squeals. The swine won't bite the hands that feeds them meals. But Liberal Dan will see us through. It's the best show that you're not listening to. So when you hear the call, animals unite. Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right. A leftist voice on air, exposing MAGA treason, breaking through their lies with facts, logic, and reason, unmasking hypocrisy. The truth will be our guide. Call out their lies, justice is on our side. 'Cause Liberal Dan will see us through. It's the best show that you're not listening to. So when you hear the call, animals unite. Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right. Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left. That's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you live from New Orleans, Louisiana. Shout out to all the sparklers who are joining us through into the show. Appreciate y'all for stopping by. If you're on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button. Also subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. And you can always, after the show, also share lots of other videos, including those music parodies that are on liberaldanradio.com, which is the link to the YouTube channel as well. If you rated last week sometime, you'll notice a slight improvement, I guess, in what's going on, because I have a new laptop finally. And the new laptop actually has a much better camera than my previous camera too, which is great. I just have to get used to looking down this way and kind of looking here whilst conversing instead of looking all over the place. So if I find myself looking up and it looks weird, I do apologize. I'm getting used to the new setup. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate y'all. I did see Steve from across the pond.
It's no Scottish, it's crap.
I got the soundboard half set up at this point. Still have to do some minor tweaks around the laptop. Still trying to download stuff from OneDrive, so it's been a process and a half, but the audio sounds weird again. All right, let's see if I can fix the audio again. Let's look and see what we're doing. I'm still coming into the podcast. I don't know. Still is there. I don't know what's going on. It says it's using the podcast mic, so it should be fine. Is it low or what? I don't know what's going on. So anyway, tweak my mic. Ugh. Let me just see. I'm going to turn on so you're going to hear it in duplicate just a second. I just want to hear what it sounds like. Let me just see. I'm going to turn on so you're going to hear it in... I do hear it kind of being echoey. Maybe moving back from the mic a smidge will help. Let me know if that helped. Let me see. Maybe moving back is going to cause it issues. Let me also check the sound settings as well, because, you know, sometimes the sound just screws up a good bit, and you never know. Maybe I have to lower the volume a little bit on the sound setting as well. It is a PC. So thank you, Woke Mike, for the subscription. Appreciate you. Let's see. Let's just play this now since I've done this. Appreciate you. It's still screwing up. Let me unplug and replug. Is that better? Let's see if we're still on the right microphone. Let me see if I am no longer scratchy. If I'm itchy or scratchy. Let me see if I am no longer scratchy. That does sound better. So apparently the old cliche thing of turning it off and turning it back on again works yet again. So there we go. We fixed the problem. Being tech support is what happens. This is what happens, I guess, when you're tech support. You need to do that. So anyway, welcome again to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left. That's right. Appreciate y'all for stopping by. Again, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff helps. Please remember to, you can support the show many other ways as well. You can Venmo Liberal Dan. This way. It's this way now. Now that I'm not using Restream again, I have to get used to what hand points to what. So Liberal Dan at Venmo. You can do that. You can go to Buy Me a Cider. Go to liberaldan.com, click the Buy Me a Cider button, or go to Buy me a cider at liberaldanradio.com. Easy for me to say that. If you think I've said this enough, I'd get used to it. Or you could also go to patreon.com/liberaldan, support the show monthly. But the most important thing you can do, go over to the YouTube channel when I'm not on the air. Go watch, clips, like, share, comment, help the algorithm, because as we say, Algor needs more rhythm. And we have shirts like that at the Liberal Dan Radio store as well, including an FDT, the Man of La Maga shirt, dealing with the hoax song that we did. So all of those shirts are available as well to support the show. But again, the most important thing to do is help the algorithm so we can grow the show, hit 2,000 subs and beyond. So without further ado, let's start talking about the topics of the day. A lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about. Again, I'm trying to retrain myself to look this way because, again, with the old laptop and with the old camera setting up there, every time I looked down here it looked weird, so I have to retrain my brain that this is how it looks the best. It looks the best by looking at this screen. So anyway, JD Vance. We're going to start off with some of the small stuff and then slowly get into the big stuff. And at the end of the show, we'll be talking about Supreme Court rulings that happened today, specifically looking at the Alito dissents in them, because Justice Alito is the stupidest Supreme Court justice that has ever existed on the Supreme Court, until somebody makes an argument that somebody else is stupider. But they're going to have to do a really good job explaining why they're stupider, because holy shit. But J.D. Vance at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in California said that the Watergate scandal, which led to the resignation of Nixon in 1974 because they threatened to impeach him if he didn't resign, says it would have been a 12-hour news story in today's media environment. Now, he may very well be right, but he's probably wrong as to why he's right. Like, he's trying to say that it was not a big deal. It was not a big scandal. And the idea that that could have taken down a presidency is crazy, as he says. But then again, this was the 70s. This was a different time. This was when, people, who were in the Senate and in the House, despite having political differences on, beliefs, tended to work together on things and tended to have a view of the presidency that, held it that you should be having somebody there who was, moral and ethical. And when you catch somebody doing immoral and unethical things in the White House, that you should get rid of that person and impeach them. And the Republican Party politicized it when they impeached Clinton for lying about, having something happening to him, have a little filleting going on or whatever. He lied about his affair under oath, but I mean, it was ridiculous to be asked that question to begin with. But, you know, they started making the whole process political. But yes, today, if Donald Trump did exactly what Richard Nixon had done, not only would it be a very short news story, A, because the media doesn't do its job, and B, because there's so much other stuff that's going on, and Donald Trump would just, you know, distract us with something else, like he'd go bomb Iran again, or something like that. And then you'd also have the Republican Party, who, you know, would refuse to do anything to hold Donald Trump accountable for anything that he does. So, absolutely, he's correct in that it would be a 12-hour news story, except it might be covered more on shows like Hal Sparks, Boston Brian, Liberal Dan Radio, etc., etc., etc. But the major corporate media news outlets would absolutely just move on to something else, because compared to Trump's corruption, it may very well have seemed like, you know, a nothing burger, because Donald Trump just has that much more corruption. So anyway, hey Jolie, good to see you as well. Hey Big Hook, new computer, nice modded, nice, you know, camera and everything. You know, I look so pretty, right? I feel pretty. But I mean, I was really surprised to hear that I guess JD Vance agreed with, you know, Lynyrd Skynyrd, because Watergate does not bother him. Does your conscience bother you? Tell me true. Sweet home Alabama. Anyway, so I'm sure he would also agree that a Southern man wouldn't want Neil Young around anyhow, simply because of the fact that, you know, doesn't understand the idea behind the song of Southern Man. Neither did Lynyrd Skynyrd. Hey Jackie, good to see you. Thank you for becoming a liberal. Danimal appreciates you. You too can subscribe, and you can gift subscription to others. It's another great way to support the show, or gift or memberships on YouTube, subscriptions over on Twitch, and you could also, as well, gift, you know, buy bits at Everest, do super chat, super stickers, etc. Anyway, so that's the little spiel I wanted to do on JD Vance. So then, of course, we have Snopes and Donald Trump and Donald Trump's new USA passport. So we definitely would be chagrined if we didn't show the tweet or the so-called truth that Donald Trump posted on his propaganda site, which is the USA's new passport, which says, "Welcome, but be good, President DJT." So this is literally something from Donald Trump's own page, own Truth Social page, where he's saying that the passport says, "Welcome, but be good." Passports are not visas. Donald Trump's an idiot. He doesn't understand how things work. If you have a passport, it's something for U.S. citizens to use when traveling abroad. It doesn't say, you know, it's not something you give to people coming here to tell them to be good. It's not something you're giving to people who come in, like, you know, refugees, like his little gift baskets that he decided that he's going to give to the South African so-called refugees. And more on that in a little bit. However, Snopes, I don't know what the bigger deal is that Donald Trump is an idiot and doesn't understand what passports are for, or that Truth Social wants to say that this is not confirmed. So Trump claims special edition U.S. passport says, "Welcome, be good." But here's what we know. We know that Donald Trump said that the passport is going to have those words in them, because Donald Trump's Truth Social post said that it has those words on them. But at the time of the writing, U.S. State Department has not issued any commemorative 250th anniversary passports, so Snopes could not independently verify whether the documents contained the printed phrase "Welcome, but be good," as some social media users appeared to suggest. Therefore, we leave this claim unrated. The President of the freaking United States says that these words are, and while Donald Trump does lie a lot, when Donald Trump tells you who he is and admits to the stupid shit, we will absolutely believe when he admits to the stupid shit. Because when he's admitting to something is when we believe him. He just doesn't admit to his wrongdoing as much, or if at all. But still, he is a damned idiot. But Snopes, again, are a bunch of damned idiots because they're unwilling to pull the trigger to say that this is what is stated, or what the President of the United States is saying, what is on his, you know, ego-stroking passports. Can you imagine what might have happened if Joe Biden put a passport image of himself on the passport, and if Biden had put, welcome be good on the passports?
Had Biden done it, MAGA would flip. Had Biden done it, whole numbers would flip. Had Biden done it, the screen fell play. But Trump did it, so it must be okay.
Jeff, at least there's a huge crowd at the fair. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second, too, because of other things that also went on at the fair. This is just crazy stuff going on from Donald John Trump. But usually I don't record these things, so I usually have the Opus Clip software handling this stuff for me. However, sometimes I will record things and upload them immediately just because, I'd want to make sure that I get the whole story in. So this is from the Jerusalem Post. And this says, Germany recorded 8,725 anti-Semitic incidents in 2025. Independent watchdog says Germany recorded 8,725 anti-Semitic incidents, the highest level on record. Now, have we forgotten our history? Because I guarantee you that only 8,725 incidents is not something that sets a record. It's not the highest level on record. I guarantee you that the highest level on record, thank you for the ads that I didn't ask for, but I guarantee you that the highest level of record of anti-Semitic incidents in Germany happened, in the 1940s, late 1930s. I mean, can you get any more ridiculous? RAs in Germany, the Independent Anti-Semitism Monitoring Network, tracks both criminal and non-criminal anti-Semitic incidents. In 2025, RIAS recorded 8,725 anti-Semitic incidents, equating to roughly 24 cases per day. And yet it goes into a whole bunch of as to what these may have been. And again, simply waving a flag of Palestine for Palestinians, is not an act of anti-Semitism. So I don't know what necessarily they're referring to as anti-Semitism. But here's something that's not a shocker. But according to the Jerusalem Post, they believe it is a shocker. They say, interestingly, far-right anti-Semitic incidents were higher than ever. That's not a shock because most anti-Semitism comes from the right. The right wing is full of anti-Semites, from Donald Trump saying that he only wants the Jews counting his money, which supports the old trope of Jews and money. You have Donald Trump going to a conference on anti-Semitism and saying during the 2024 campaign that if he would have lost that, or if he would lose the campaign in 2024, that it would be the fault of the Jews. So, yeah, and his anti-Semitism is, stoking the fires of anti-Semitism and bigotry across the world. We talked about that before as well, when, what's-his-face, the former head of the Border Patrol, he went ahead and gave a little speech there and, was talking about their attempts to re-emigrate people or remove people from the country, and all the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, and the white supremacists over in Europe are looking at what this administration is doing and is basing their actions on the Trump administration. Much like Germany and Nazi Germany did when they went to the Jim Crow South and was wondering how the southern states could manage to discriminate against black people so well, despite the protections of rights that were stated and listed in the Constitution as of that point. So, yeah. But yeah, the idea that 2025 is the highest amount of anti-Semitism on record, the math there is not mathing. That does not calculate, that does not compute. There were plenty of more per year during World War II, and specifically during the Holocaust. So I don't know who wrote this. I mean, we could see who wrote this article, I guess. Matilda Heller is the one who wrote the article. Maybe Matilda Heller needs to, throw in a little bit of a caveat here and saying how ridiculous it is. I don't know. Or maybe the people doing the study need to remember that the fact that the most amount of anti-Semitism that took place in Germany was during Nazi Germany. Unless they're trying to make the claim that the current country of Germany is a new country since maybe the unification of East and West Germany, and if that is the point they're trying to create. But even so, the so-called optics of it doesn't seem like it's a very smart statement to make. So anyway, yeah, there's that. And not to be outdone, we have another fun failure to understand the Constitution. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick from Texas had this lovely thing to say, standing behind Donald Trump. Now, here's the thing I do want to point out, that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is very brave. He's very, very brave for standing right behind MAGA Von Schitz's pants, because, he might very well shit his pants, and he's right in the blast zone. So let's hear what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has to say about during the religious liberty event. And of course, Donald Trump sitting with the America is Back red hat or whatever, which, hawking his own wares in the middle of the Oval Office. Can you imagine if Joe Biden presented a Joe Biden campaign hat in the middle of the Oval Office?
Had Biden done it, MAGA would flip. Had Biden done it, whole numbers would flip. Had Biden done it, the screen fell play. But Trump did it, so it must be okay.
But here we go. Here's what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had to
Can I
say.
just say one last thing?
Please.
On the issue of church and state,
It looks like Trump looks like he's about to fall asleep, but this is on church and state.
that was used as a hammer against almost all of our witnesses. One of the important recommendations that we made, if that happens in the future, if any superior person in the military, a superintendent of a school district, someone in the healthcare system, whoever uses that against someone who is simply standing up for their religious liberty or simply praying in public, that within a short amount of time, if they allege separation of church and state, that public official must in writing explain how that person has violated the Constitution. Because, again, the separation of church and state is not in the Constitution.
Wrong. Sorry, buddy. I don't know how these people are allowed to sit in government when they have no idea what the hell they're talking about, especially as it pertains to civics. First of all, let's read the text of the First Amendment, shall we? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That in and of itself is a conversation about, the wall of separation between church and state. But let's go further, because you have Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist. Now, when it comes to who I'm going to believe on what the Constitution does, especially and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, colloquially known as the Bill of Rights, I do believe that I would want to trust Thomas Jefferson's words as opposed to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's words as to what the words that were written by the Founding Fathers mean. And the second paragraph of his letter to the Danbury Baptist specifically states, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience, I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties. So, Thomas Jefferson clearly states that there is a wall of separation between church and state, and that is created by the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause in the First Amendment. So I don't know what school Dan Patrick went to, but if it's Texas public schools, then we have additional issues above that, but clearly Texas public schools are failing to teach their students basic civics and what, words mean and how words translate into, meaning, etc. So, again, Dan Patrick basically is an idiot. To Jeff Curry says, I heard a TV preacher say people don't listen to God anymore. Okay, I'll try it. Where is he speaking next? He's speaking in your heart, right? Biden wasn't a corporatist. The church at every game says, if you're talking about Pelosi with her alleged insider trading, ousting most pro-union, pro-working class, I'd agree with you. Oh, gamer jam. Hot take. If we keep doing the same stupid corporatist bullshit that led to Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, it will definitely lead to Trump 3.0. I mean, Biden did say that he is a capitalist. I don't know what you're doing, Rose, but I need to move this thing out the way because you're making lots of noise. Rose is here. She's just not hopping and joining the show. Anyway, so Biden did say that he's a capitalist, which might suggest that he's a corporatist. But I do have something that I do want to say on the idea of like the more centrist, moderate type Democrats that are out there. This kind of extends on something that I said about James Carville and what's her face, the person who is Cuomo's campaign manager in his last attempt to run for governor when he ran in the primaries against Mamdani and then ran again in the general as an independent voter or whatever, as an independent, candidate or whatever. They're trying to sit here and say, get your own party to the Democratic Socialists. And to them, I say this: vote blue no matter who. If you're a centrist, moderate type Democrat and you live in a district that has elected or has selected a Democratic Socialist or someone to the left of you for the office, for the election that you're voting on, you need to vote blue no matter who. Otherwise, you have no ability to tell the Democratic Socialists, the leftists, etc., that they should be voting blue no matter who. You need to follow what you're doing. You need to practice what you preach. You need to put your money where your mouth is. And if you're going to sit here and tell people to vote blue no matter who, you need to also sit there and follow your own things. And you also need to vote blue no matter who and support the people who are to the left of you, even if you don't agree with some of their so-called more, radical stances that everybody should be equal and that trans people should be treated with dignity and, that workers deserve a, fair wage, etc., etc., etc. Those are all shocking things, I know, to some people who are trying to play the middle, I guess. But in reality, if you're supporting the Democratic causes and you're telling people on the left to vote blue no matter who, you absolutely need to also vote blue no matter who, even if that person's to the left of you. Just saying. So, let's see. Alyosha and Fetterman is a GOP. I thought he was a Democrat. I thought he was a Democrat too, and maybe he was until the stroke. I don't know. I mean, sometimes brain damage, mental damage can cause you to have, horrible ideas like, that Donald Trump is right and, other fun stuff, agreeing with Republicans more often than not, etc., etc., etc. So, let's see. Atrocious at every game. They didn't vote blue no matter who in 2016 or 2024. Regardless, I'm not voting blue no matter who when a candidate knifed Biden in the back. Otherwise, I'm all for a Big Ten. I mean, look, I would sit here and say beating MAGA, beating Trump is more important than people's anger at any particular candidate or any particular voter. I am not going to sit here and say, like, for example, old Graham up in Maine. I don't agree with his tattoo. I don't, agree with, I believe his people that come forth accusing him of wrongdoings. I believe them, absolutely. It probably would have been better to have somebody better be the nominee from the Democratic Party in the state of Maine. However, that's what's going on, as old Trumpy boy says.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. And Donald Trump is accused of much worse. And as such, we need to focus on making sure that we take back the Senate and take back the House. And then worry about making sure that we replace Graham Planner with somebody else. So, thank you, 250 Kilo Ohm, for subscribing and being a subscriber for 15 months. Appreciate you for that. Anyway, let's go ahead, and we're going to be talking about this thing, for example. And there's a reason why, there is a reason why that we're going to be playing this audio, and we're going to be playing this video, at least. We are going to be playing this video that is from the Freedom 250 Fest or whatever. We're going to be playing this video and another video, and we're going to be doing it without sound on because I don't want copyright strikes or copyright hits or whatever. I don't want this, to be demonetized or whatever. So, yeah, here we go. This is live opening day from the Great American Fair, and also from this guy Manny's birthday, because apparently his birthday was that day. And if you already know who this person Manny is, don't bury the lead. We're going to get to it in a second. So here we go. We have this person who's performing on the doing some acrobatics, and there's this guy on a bicycle doing a weird ass thing on a bicycle. She's twirling around on her hoop. Very impressive. Very, very talented. This point, the guy is just sitting down. He's sitting down right now. He's not doing anything else nefarious at this point. But clearly he was able to find a place close to this area. So this area is clearly not being very well populated. And there she is twirling around, twirling around, twirling around. And if you notice, he's having some problems keeping his camera steady. Like, it's pretty easy to keep your camera steady these days. But he seems to be having some issues keeping his camera steady as he's watching this very talented woman doing her acrobatic acts on the stage. So again, and one of the reasons that I'm, again, not playing the audio for this is, like, there's some sort of mixed mashup of music that they're playing that includes Hulk Hogan's I'm a Real American. It includes Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, including the lyric that I always think is misheard, as born down in a dead man's town. I first hit my tuchus when I hit the ground. Like, that's the lyric that I thought it was until I was corrected. So again, he's having lots of problems keeping his hands from, holding the camera still. So that's all we need to see of this one at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and, shut that down. And then we're going to go to the next one. And again, the next one, it kept on playing. Like, let's just rewind this a little bit, and pause this again and then bring it back open. So this is the guy who made this video. The guy that made this video right here is all dressed up in an American flag outfit and some overalls, and the overalls have plenty of room to fit your hands. And he's sitting there setting up his new setup simply because I guess his old phone was broken. But the problem is that there is music playing in the background, and the music playing in the background, I think, is Elvis's Suspicious Minds. He's sitting there talking about stuff, I guess, and talking about how his phone overheated or whatever, or ran out of battery power, and he's walking around, talking about the stuff. This guy has, like, he has more subscribers on his YouTube channel than I have on mine. But I don't know what just happened there. So let's rewind a little bit further. So there we go. He's sitting there looking around, and one of the reasons I did want to show this is, look at how extremely packed this Trump Freedom Fest 250 thing is. I mean, they are packed to the gills in this place, right? I mean, you got Elvis playing in the background. You've got the Washington Monument up there. You've got all this green grass. Unless they're all dressed as John Cena, clearly there's an issue. But here's the camera's moving around a second, and there's a police officer or security or what have you. And now he's being escorted from the event. Why is he being escorted from the event? MAGA man arrested for self-pleasuring himself at Trump America 250 spectacle. A MAGA personality, that deserves a... A MAGA personality was arrested at President Donald Trump's Great American State Fair last week after witnesses say they saw him doing an act of self-love for fear of not getting pulled from other video source places or whatever, to an acrobatics act while clad in an Uncle Sam getup. Gian or whatever his name is, Rachtelli, a White Ring live streamer who goes by Manny online, was charged with lewd, indecent, or obscene acts after being apprehended at the problem-plagued patriotic spectacle in D.C. last Thursday. Arrest documents reviewed, had 3 separate witness statements. One detail-oriented observer told police officers they saw Rachtelli recording female circus performers before he stuck his right hand down his pants and moved back and forth approximately 6 times in what appeared to be self-pleasure. Now, if you do it once or twice, that's probably just adjusting yourself. But if you do it any more than that, it starts to get problematic. It starts to be a gesture that would make some people feel unsafe, don't you think? Another reported a performer from the Circuit Mechanics troupe approached them to point out an older white male who was making lewd gestures in his pants during their act. A third said they saw the accused with his hands in his pants, likely doing what we all thought he was doing. And maybe he's just, a 6-pump chump. I don't know.
Oh my.
Some people don't last that long, but the live stream on YouTube, which we were just watching, took place during the fair on the day of his arrest, and it abruptly cuts off after a police officer approaches him and then escorts him to a group of several other members of law enforcement. He obliquely addressed his arrest on several X reposts, amplifying one defender who said, "Manny's only crime is being a huge patriot," and that, in their view, in his eyes, he's innocent until proven guilty. Yes, according to the law, this guy is innocent until proven guilty. However, according to the people around him and the testimonies, there is evidence that shows that he was acting like a pervert. Now, is it any surprise that Donald Trump and his 250 freedom fuckfest or whatever is going to have somebody who, is also a pervert, since Donald Trump is also a pervert? The incident comes amid a string of embarrassments around the Great American State Fair. Of course, there's the cancellation of the performances of everybody who ducked out, and then it was so poorly attended that they canceled the Vanilla Ice show, so Vanilla Ice couldn't even stop, collaborate, or listen. And they misspelled Freedom 250 on the billboard as you were leaving the event. They can't even spell Freedom 250 right, because Donald Trump did say that he loves the poorly educated after the 2016 Nevada primaries, and as such, we know that he, is going to hire people who are poorly educated, who can't spell, who don't know how to use spell check, whatever. Look, I misspell things sometimes inadvertently, but still, you'd think on a billboard such as that, you'd have somebody come spell check it for you, right? Trump seemed defensive about his big to-do. Do you think the people appreciate what a fantastic job we did in building and operating the Great American State Fair at the National Mall, packed with happy people and everyone loving it? And it also goes, ask yourself this simple question. Do you think that Obama or sleepy Joe Biden could have done it? The answer is no. But yeah, so Donald Trump says the Obama couldn't have done it. But let's go back to the supposedly well done thing. This is again from earlier in the video, while Elvis is playing, and you see here, what the hell is this little facade is here, and it is not, anything, it's hovering, so it's not down on the ground like it should be. This is just tarp, and apparently a lot of the other things that look like it might be, going in deep or whatever, that also deserves a... Oh my. Are not. They're just, kind of made to look that way. So yes, this Freedom Fest is again, another example of another Donald Trump white trash spectacle or whatever. But, the hilarious thing is that I'm sitting there, and as I'm listening to Elvis's songs or what have you, the because I love you too much, baby. I'm sitting here thinking of alternate lyrics in my head that pertain to what might be going on. I'm caught in a trap 'cause I started to fap because I stroked it too much, baby. Anyway, and other things that could have been sung about that, and I don't know, usually when I hear a parody, I think of, I try and think, let me write the whole damn song. And maybe I will, I don't know. But at this point, I don't have that urge to do it. But yeah, I can't go on singing this song. I might get a copyright strike, baby. Da, da, da. Dan is going to give me a stroke. Why am I going to give you a stroke, bald Thanos? Anyway, so that's that video. Again, sometimes, as I say at the end of some of these videos, if you like to see, like, subscribe, and share, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, and again, it doesn't really matter because at this point, we're still continuing on with the live stream. So maybe I'll throw in a little bit about that after the fact. But playing his magical flute, the beating the bishop or whatever. Well, I got a lot of stuff I want to record today because it's going to be kind of longer content about what's going on in this country. So, Woke Mike, he has more subscribers because he has more people making fun of him? Probably, but I don't know. I made fun of him once. Somebody had said about this guy that, don't worry, Manny. He says, Trump will get you off. And I was like, I think that already happened. Anyway. See, 55280 Andy, I believe they were totally distinct events. I'm open to correction if you have something I should read. What, between the Smithsonian and the other event? Maybe. I'm not sure. I would have to look that up or whatever. Anyway, let's continue discussing the other topics that we want to talk about today. I'm actually pretty impressed that we've covered this much, and it's only 8:35. So, James Jaramillo, oh my. Oh my. Hey, Vasantha, good to see you again. When it comes to the House Spark shows and people coming in, I don't do as great of a job of saying hello to everybody, but I do try and say hello to this, especially the regulars when I see them. Anywho, so, and again, just to people who might have been stumbling in who are new, again, I have my new laptop. I would love to set some sort of goal, like to be able to get, like, I don't know what I would do if we do it, but if I could raise like $2-3 grand in super chat, super stickers, Venmo contributions, etc., by the end of the next PayPal payment statement or whatever, I might do like a t-shirt giveaway or something, simply because of the fact that it would help me pay off the finance laptop that I'm paying a ridiculous amount of interest on, simply because of the fact that, I needed to get this now to make sure that I can do the podcast that I want to do instead of the podcast for the last 2 weeks that I've been forced to do because the other computer from my previous workplace didn't have the graphical processing capabilities. So, let's talk about the next subject then. So, in the state of Colorado, the Jeffco public school system is being accused of the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, which is laughable that this administration still has an Office for Civil Rights, especially when Linda McMahon is trying to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. And you would think that the Office for Civil Rights might have been moved over to the Department of Justice or something, but I guess they haven't finished dismantling the entire Department of Education yet and ruining our country's education. So apparently they believe that they violated Title IX. That's the accusation by the Office of Civil Rights, alleging that the district allowed male students to participate in girls' sports according with access to girls' locker rooms, bathrooms, and overnight accommodations. As part of the findings, OCR said athletic rosters indicated up to 61 male students that occupied roster spots on girls' teams. Here's the kicker. The school district disputes the claim, saying that no boys were competing as athletes on girls' teams. The rosters did include the names of boys who were managers of said teams, trainers of said teams, mascots of said teams, cheerleaders, and similar support roles that appeared on the team rosters but were not players. However, because this administration wants to vilify trans folks and make it seem to be like it's a much bigger problem than it is. It's not really a problem at all, but they're trying to manufacture a problem out of this. They are just wanting to take these names on these paperwork and this paperwork that includes the rosters and saying, oh, they must be having boys competing with girls, blah, blah, blah. Jeffco said that the OCR never asked the district to clarify the roles of the students listed on the rosters before announcing its findings. According to the district, it repeatedly requested that the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, correct what is called a factual error, but the OCR declined because truth doesn't matter to this administration. This administration loves to lie and loves to vilify people, and that's how they want to get and maintain and retain power. Despite their dispute over the roster count, the federal government continues to argue that the district's broader policies on sports participation and access to facilities based on gender identity violate the interpretation of Title IX. But if they're using these rosters as their evidence, then these rosters aren't evidence that boys are playing with girls, because it's boys who are managing girls, boys that might be helping to train, boys that might be, and maybe they're helping to train them in the training room, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the boys are in the training room at the time that people are in states of undress. You know, it shouldn't be a bad thing for somebody to be in a sport. Well, hell, I was on the boys swim team when I was in high school, but I also managed the girls swim team. And guess what? Some girls from the girls swim team actually swam with us. And one of them could do certain swimming strokes faster than I could do it because she was very talented. So, I mean, they participated with us, but again, there was no boys that participated on the girls swim team, but I did participate in as a manager, like keeping track of times, keeping tracks of scores, as it pertains to, you know, the divers and what the divers would score when they did their dives. You know, according to the Trump administration, this is an example of a boy participating in girls' sports. The district also says that it is caught between Colorado law, which protects gender identity, and the federal government's current interpretation of Title IX, calling the situation an impossible situation. I bet we will see this heading to the Supreme Court. But again, it is the policy here and the belief here of myself and of Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left, that's right, that trans women are women, trans girls are girls, and we do not vilify trans folk. And what? There's only like, in the NCAA, there's like, what, 10 overall athletes who are trans women participating in the entirety of the sport. But, you know, bigots are going to bigot. You know, the folks are going to be, you know, creating the monster out of nothing when the anti-trans folks and the MAGA folks are the actual monsters here because they're vilifying trans folk. And again, I'll point out, as I always say when we discuss trans issues, especially trans issues involving young trans women, well, young trans people altogether, because this study, I don't think, differentiates between trans boys and trans girls or non-binary folks or whatever. But if somebody is trans, for every single person that accepts them for who they are and doesn't misgender them, dead name them, etc., they are 50% less likely for each person to unalive themselves, to off themselves or whatever. So, like, again, one person means 50% less likely from whatever the rate is for trans youth overall. And then, the second person would be like 75% less likely because it's another 50% on top of that. And then another 50% on top of that, on top of that, on top of that. So the more people that respect young trans children, the safer they are and the less likely they are to commit acts of self-harm. So that is why I believe it is more important to care about the lives of young children than it is to worry about whether or not some student missed out on some scholarship because some trans person happened to place ahead of them. And the other side of that coin is that maybe we shouldn't be basing scholarships on athletic ability because it leaves out other people. Again, we've discussed this before. The conservatives like to cherry pick fairness. Like, they won't say a lick about somebody whose parents could afford to buy a personal trainer. We won't say a lick about the parents who can afford to get them specialized equipment or who have the time and the money and the ability to be able to spend time with them, to work with them and train and hone their skills. Whereas other parents who might be, living in poverty or maybe lower middle class type folks with two working parents might not have the money to buy trainers, might not have the ability to purchase, the higher end equipment that might help them, be more successful in athletics. And there are other people, so where's the fairness on that? They're not going to argue that because they believe money solves every problem. I mean, money does help, but they don't believe that, they don't see that as an issue. They see that as they worked hard for it. Some of them didn't, some of them did. So why punish them for it? But then you have other people who maybe have a thyroid condition that doesn't have, that doesn't allow you to be athletic, or maybe you have a wheelchair that you have to use because you can't participate in some of the sports that other people might participate in. Guess what? Those people are not going to be getting athletic scholarships either. Is that fair? That they can't participate and try and get, the scholarships? No. It's not something that they're going to look at. So if you're going to worry about the people who are, missing out on scholarships because of this, then maybe you should be a little consistent as it pertains to who's getting them and who's not. So anyway. Let's see. So DB Golding says, no, the Smithsonian is not responsible for organizing the overarching National America 250 event. While they originally planned museum programming in tandem with the official bipartisan commission, federal resources and responsibility for the main celebrations were diverted to the White House-backed Freedom 250 initiative. There you go. Let's see. I haven't caught the forecast lately, but I'm hoping for rain on the 4th. Oh, I would love for there to be just a torrential downpour. Question before I move on with the show. Can you hear my child screaming in the background while he's playing his games? Can you hear that right now? I would like to know if you can hear that before I go, maybe shut off my camera a second as I go, whatever, so you don't see my butt. You don't need to see me sauntering away. No, we can't hear him. Perfect. Good. I'm glad the noise cancellation is preventing y'all from hearing him screaming while he's playing his games. So, yay. Bob Thanos, I thought that was your cat. My cat sounded like that. There'd be much problem with the cats. Christina says, I'm not worried about kids in bathrooms or locker rooms. How about hungry kids in the cafeteria? Exactly. I'm also worried about that too. But MAGA folks are not worried about that. They're going to cut, funding for, food stamps. They're going to cut funding for, school meals, etc. They'll probably try and stop you from, giving all kids in a school. Like there's a policy here that some people in New Orleans use. They basically say if enough people in your district qualify for food stamps, then they can just get a blanket grant to cover food for everybody. So it doesn't matter what their income level is of the parents, that everybody gets to participate and have free lunches, which has been great for us. We could probably afford to send them with food or whatever, but they get to eat at school. They get breakfast and lunch, I think, at the high school, and then they get, I think, just lunch at the middle school. But still, it's a good thing. It takes away. It's much more efficient. A lot less paperwork to have to go through. It probably saves a lot of money not having to deal with that paperwork and processing it. If you basically say, okay, enough people in this area are on food stamps, therefore we're going to allow just everybody at the school to get fed. And feeding kids is a good thing to do. But, sometimes conservatives don't care about that because conservatives only care about, the fetuses and the embryos. Once born, fend for yourselves, kids. Right? Balthanos, wait, does he play Grand Theft Auto 5? No, not that I'm aware of, at least. I don't think he does. I might actually try and get Grand Theft Auto 6, and I might start actually doing more nerdydan.com streams as well. If you're watching here and you also want to subscribe to me and follow me for nerdydan.com, nerdydan, D-O-T-C-O-M. That is on it's on YouTube, nerdydan.com, and also on Twitch, nerdydan.com as well. 2 separate accounts. So, but he does play Fortnite. He plays Minecraft as well. I got a funny message from Aaron, who is also a mod for Henry, I believe, right, Aaron? Who was basically saying that Thomas was complaining. My oldest son was complaining that the youngest son wouldn't let him in his squad, and it says they were going to unfriend, and that one was going to unfollow his Twitch account if that happened. So, anyway, here in Oregon, I get extra snap during the summer. Well, that's good. Anywho, let's move on to the next subject. I need to scroll back up here for a bunch of my notes. I'm recording a lot of stuff today. I'm going to have lots of clips, short clips, but I'm going to have a lot of longer clips too, apparently. So I might have to upload some of these tomorrow, depending on when we finish this show, which I still have plenty of stuff that we're going to go over. I am trying to not... I think we'll do the gift basket thing first, though. We'll cover that one before we cover the other stuff. Before we cover the Supreme Court rulings, because I understand the Supreme Court rulings can be a little bit dull for some folks, but we're going to focus more on we're not going to read the entire rulings, but we're going to, at some point when we get to that later on in the show, we will be discussing how Justice Alito is the dumbest Supreme Court justice that has ever existed. So... Big Hook says, Fed students do much better. Minnesota is a better state for feeding students and leaving shame and bills out of the already difficult environment for students that students navigate. My school one year was trying to claim that I owed 50 cents. But the way they reported it is that I owed negative 50 cents. And I posted that to my Facebook page, my personal one. And I was like, hey, what do you think this means? And the vast majority of the people said they owe you 50 cents. I was like, yeah, that's what I believe too. But they're saying that we owe 50 cents. So, petty me sent Henry to school with 50 pennies. Here you go, school. Here's your money that we supposedly owe you. 50 pennies. There you go. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to talk about today before I get to the other planned subjects was... I was on the phone with United Healthcare earlier today again, or Optum, which, again, United Healthcare. We have restarted the process of the prior authorizations for my Zepbound, because I don't know why it was able to restart, but they restarted the entire process of trying to get the prior authorization, and that started on the 16th. Now let's talk about the policies here that as it pertains to United Healthcare and Optum. When it comes to prior authorization. Actually, let's record this because I think this is important. So we're going to talk about for a little bit the United Healthcare and Optum and the silliness that I had to deal with today as it pertains to getting a prior authorization. That includes the fact that I got a notification saying that the request that was submitted on the 26th of June was pending. What I didn't realize is there was also a request for the 15th or the 16th of June, and that's when their another attempt to try and get me Zepbound again started. So they sent the claim back, or the request back, to my doctor's office, saying that they were missing important information. Of course, I don't understand why my doctor at this point is missing important information. We already know what information is supposed to be listed in an attempt to try and get a prior authorization for Zepbound, because it's more than just what United Healthcare lists on its website. Again, United Healthcare, if you haven't watched this and listened to me rant about this before, United Healthcare lists all you need is a high BMI and obstructive sleep apnea diagnosis. You just need a diagnosis of it. You don't need anything else. That's at least according to their own website. But nope, it's much more than that. And they keep moving the goalposts. So that's why I'm angry at United Healthcare, because they always keep moving the goalposts. But I'm also angry at my doctor's office support staff, who can't seem to handle the simple idea of getting all of the information together, or maybe just simply calling them before trying to get a prior authorization done, to make sure that you get everything done, you dot all your I's, you cross all of your T's, etc. I don't understand why they can't handle this simple concept. But again, and this is going to go back to United Healthcare or Optum again, because when they submitted the request on the 16th of June, they were given 96 hours to return the data. Now, that in and of itself should be seen as ridiculous. What doctor's office today is going to be able to process such a response in 96 hours? It's going to take more than 96 hours to get that done. But I did ask a question of the Optum employee. I said, look, does that include weekends? And she says, yes, it would include weekends. Well, that's dumb, because because people don't work on the weekends. And she said, well, it doesn't matter, because 4 days after June 16th is a Friday. June 16th was a Tuesday. 96 hours, 4 days later, is Saturday. But no, she wanted to argue with me and not do math properly. Apparently counting. I don't know if she's one of the poorly educated voters that voted for Trump or not, but clearly she's not educated enough on how to count. Because she goes Tuesday, the 16th, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days. I'm like, that's not how counting works. Tuesday to Wednesday 1 day, Wednesday to Thursday 1 day, Thursday to Friday 1 day, Friday to Saturday 1 day. The fourth day is a Saturday and a weekend, and it's ridiculous. You've only basically given them 72 hours and not 40 and not 96. So I had it up to here already with them. She was like, there's no reason for you to yell or use expletives or whatever while trying to blame United Healthcare for everything. I'm like, you know what? Well, then blame United Healthcare for the fact that I'm pissed off right now, because this has been going on since March, and I've not been able to get the medicine that I need, that I've used to lose 163 pounds on. And I've already gained 7 pounds back since I don't have the use of the pens. I'm actually on my last pen, because I've managed to stretch things out enough, but still, I've stopped losing weight and I've started gaining weight again. This medicine helps me a lot. Helps me more than a lot. It helps a lot of other people. My success is great on this, and the fact they won't give it to me is just annoying. But yeah, so then now we have to deal with an appeal, because she returned the documentation on the 26th. So instead of when they returned the documentation on the 26th, it was more than 4 days later. So now it counts as a new request, which is a duplicate request, which means they don't count it. And you have to appeal to United Healthcare right now. Because even though the first set of information goes to Optum, the appeals have to go to United. And they don't communicate. They don't share data. So like when I have a denial letter from Optum, it doesn't show up on the United Healthcare portal. So I can't see what it says. And the last time I never got it in the mail either. So, again, this is just making more obstacles, more hoops to jump through, and not like the one that was spitting that the guy was himself to earlier on in the show. But, yeah. I'm very annoyed at United Healthcare right now, and at Optum and my doctor's office. And if I end up not getting the medicine again, I am absolutely going to be changing my doctor at this point. Because even though I like my doctor, their support staff is terrible. Anyway, so that's that. I hate the CEOs, but if Geico doesn't save you 15%, you don't get to murder their CEO. Just my morals. I'm not a Luigi supporter. I was this close from shouting. I mean, look, I don't sit here and support. We've had this conversation before as well on the show. I don't support, going out and killing people, but I'm wondering what the logic is. If you can use deadly force to prevent people from killing, unaliving, or whatever other people with a gun, why then is it somehow less moral to use deadly force to protect people who are trying to kill you with their keyboard or with their algorithms? Dead is dead. So I was this close from shouting something that could have gotten me in trouble. So I didn't shout it, but I was very close because I was losing my shit. I was absolutely losing my shit as it pertains to that. And look, again, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to do anything like Luigi did. I don't even own anything that would allow me to do anything like Luigi did. I don't even, it's not in my house. There's nothing in my house that would allow me to do it. I'm not going to bring in anything into my house that would allow me to do it. It's as simple as that. So I'm not a threat to anybody. But I can sit here and understand why people get so frustrated that they feel like their only option is to take drastic measures. Kind of like how Dr. King says said that the riot is the voice of the unheard, because when you're facing problems, and again, I'm not trying to say at all that what's going on with me is anywhere near close to what black people went through in their struggle. I'm just using it as an analogy. Analogies don't have to be perfect. Just don't get me wrong there. But the logic behind his statement is that when somebody gets so frustrated dealing with something that is harming them, and talking and speaking doesn't resolve the situation, it causes people to go above and beyond and use force to be able to get the change that they want to get change. So, and that's probably what Luigi Mangione was thinking as well, that people have been trying their hardest to try and get, anyway. Again, we're not justifying it. We're just saying we understand the mindset. We understand that these people and these decisions can be made, because dealing with insurance altogether is frustrating, and dealing with United Healthcare specifically. And people just say, well, just get a new job. I love my new job. My new job is great. I don't want to leave my new job. I shouldn't have to leave my new job to get better insurance. The insurance company should be better in and of itself. So, Frank, they started charging us for them to fill out FMLA paperwork, $20. That happened at my last job too. When they insisted that I was only going to be out for like a couple of days. I knew I was only going to be out for a couple of days, but they were like, well, if a complication happens, you still want to file your FMLA Act paperwork, just in case it goes over. And I got most of the FMLA paperwork filled out, but I did not get the paperwork with the statement from my doctor, or I was going to, but I was talking to the person who was the head of HR at my former firm that I worked for. And I said, they're charging me, I think it was $25 to have the paperwork filled out for the FMLA paperwork. And she was like, that's ridiculous. Don't do that. Just give me your information and that will be enough. I'm like, okay, fine. Thank you. I appreciate the fact that I don't have to pay $20 for this information. But it is absolutely ridiculous that they won't fill out FMLA paperwork for free, when it should be just, go onto your computer, fill out a couple of things, there you go. Should be able to have AI do it, right? Right? So, or Boomer, it's an entire messed up system of healthcare here. The insurance and others are just cogs in a wheel that doesn't turn very well. Yep. See, alert: impacts from the World Soccer Tournament held in major cities throughout the U.S. from June 11th through July 19th of 2026 may delay final delivery of your mail and packages. Not surprising. Probably will happen around November too, right? More about that in a little bit as well. Roxanne, exactly. Insurance shouldn't determine where you work, and insurance also shouldn't determine what care you can get. As long as it's covered, and I do think more things should be covered as well, but as long as it's covered by the plan, you shouldn't need a prior authorization. Like prior authorization, we've covered what with prior authorizations as well on a previous show too. We've covered that fact. So anyway, a primitive icon. Yeah, hi friends. Yes, people get frustrated on the last resort becomes the only option available with some people. Yep. James goes, that's another issue. Don't scream and yell at the person you were on the phone with. And look, when I talked to the person from United Healthcare who offered to reach out and help me, I never screamed or yelled at him. And at the beginning of the conversation I had with the other person from Optum, I also didn't start off screaming and yelling. I was like, look, I'm going to tell you, I'm very frustrated. I'm very annoyed. I've been dealing with this since March. I understand that you are not responsible for the policies that have been made by United Healthcare and by Optum on this issue, but you are the person who I am speaking to. And as such, you are the person who's going to have to deal with my aggravation and frustration. And then she started arguing with me about how counting works. And that's what ultimately set me off. That's what ultimately set me. And it was clear that she wasn't going to help me. You have to contact United Healthcare. Not, let me see how I can help you with this. You have to contact United Healthcare. Whereas the person from United Healthcare that I spoke to, amazingly, was fine. I think his name was Solomon or whatever. Maybe he was wise like King Solomon of old. More on that a little bit as well. Maybe, I told this dude, I was like, look, if you manage to get this fixed for me and get my prescription prescribed with dealing with all this prior authorization BS, I will buy you dinner if you're ever in New Orleans. I will absolutely buy you a dinner if you come to New Orleans, if you manage to fix this for me. Because otherwise, I'm going to have to try and figure out some other way to get the GLP-1s or whatever, because I can't. Joseph Winnie, 6 states are testing Medicare pre-authorization. Of course they are, because why wouldn't you? Are they mostly or all red states? I would bet that they are. Hey, Nick Rich, late night family phone call. Catch you later. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you, Nick. Aflac people showed up trying to sell it. I said, sign me up. They found out I just had a heart transplant. Long story short, F the duck. Yeah, pretty much. Last 2 places I worked before I was eligible for Medicare were too small for insurance coverage. Thank goodness for the Affordable Care Act, for Obamacare. Exactly. A friend of mine who recently lost their job, I was like, look, go on to healthcare.gov. You lost your job. It's a qualifying event. You should be able to qualify for health insurance immediately. So, anyway, let's move on to the other subjects that we want to talk about today, shall we? Including another recording. Texas State Board of Education approved a new sweeping literary curriculum that makes Bible passages mandatory reading for more than 5 million public school students. Stemming from a 2023 law, the rule introduces a required reading list including biblical excerpts along with works by Charles Dickens and Shakespeare. The staggered rollout will begin in 2030, so we have 4 years. They have 4 years before it takes effect, and I'm sure other states are going to try and follow suit. I'm sure Louisiana will line right up, because Louisiana also wants to put the 10 Commandments in classrooms or whatever, and that attempt to stop that failed. So, and of course, it's probably from the King James Version, not the original Hebrew, right? So the required elementary stories include things like David and Goliath, Daniel and the Lion's Den. By 4th grade, you must read passages about Jesus, and high schoolers will pair biblical excerpts with classic literature. The time mandate is staggered. Elementary students are required to read the passages first beginning in 2030. Policy follows other controversial Texas measures, such as Bible-based curricula from Blue Bonnet Learning, and the law requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every classroom. So again, the decision to mandate the Bible stories was not necessarily passed directly by the legislature, but it was spurred on by the law. But the Texas State Board of Education passed the curriculum, and that curriculum will start in 2022. But the board created the reading to fulfill an older 2023 Texas state law that required the state to choose at least one mandatory literary work for each grade level. The board then expanded on that law by creating a list of 200 required texts, which included the controversial Bible passages. So kindergarteners to elementary school students These students in elementary grades are required to read picture books or basic story retellings focused on biblical characters, virtues, and parables. Kindergarten, you have to read You Are Special, which is a Christian-themed book, and The Golden Rule. First grade, you have to read The Parable of the Prodigal Son. Second grade, David and Goliath. Third grade, The Road to Damascus, the story of Paul from Acts 9. Fourth grade, biographies of religious figures like St. Francis of Assisi. Fifth grade, selections from the book of Exodus. In middle school, you have to read Do Not Be Anxious, which is a collection of Jesus' teachings from Matthew 6:25 to 34. In seventh grade, you have to read Jonah and the Whale, the definition of love, the 1 Corinthians, and the Shepherd's Psalm, Psalm 23. I wonder if they're going to read the Pete Hegseth version of what Jules said from Pulp Fiction. Eighth grade, you have to read the 8 Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5, 1 to 12. And then in high school, ninth grade, David and Goliath, and the book of Lamentations, specifically chapter 3, the Tower of Babel, and 10th grade for English 2 from the book of Genesis and the book of Job. 11th grade, English 3 requires To Everything There Is a Season from the book of Ecclesiastes. I mean, at least you could go to that one. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. Anyway, but there's, again, a list of 200 in total entries. But of course, and maybe they're going to try and get away with it by trying to pair the Bible excerpts with classic literature. The state's new, again, there's a classical education style. Instead of treating the Bible as an isolated religious text, older students will read biblical passages as literary and historical tools alongside standard classic works. Of course, they're only including stuff from the Christian Bible. I mean, they are including the Tanakh, which is part of the Christian Bible. Of course, there's retranslations that take place, but they're not including any religious texts from any other religions, are they? No, they're not, because they're all upset about Sharia law. This is an example of Christian Sharia law. So again, younger students read Bible stories like, Noah's Ark, David and Goliath, or Jonah the Whale, alongside books like Charlotte's Web. I guess because they all have animals in them, right? Biblical ideas of justice, hardship, and morality will be taught alongside American documents like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, classic novels and drama. Older students will read books like Leo Tolstoy's Resurrection or Dickens' Great Expectation, and will use their required biblical passages to trace the themes of forgiveness or sacrifice that those authors borrowed from Scripture, supposedly. Of course, they're not going to actually teach the actual idea that you should forgive, and maybe be apologetic for things that you do to try and get forgiven yourself. Would they do that? Probably not. See, K-8 curriculum, the most significant changes in the curriculum includes that it's going to, again, emphasize Christian influence. Lessons are being reframed to focus heavily on how Judeo-Christian values, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values, there's Jewish law and Christian law. Christian law is a rewriting and just basically canceling most of Jewish law. So to say Judeo-Christian values is to not understand Judaism whatsoever. And also, so the lessons will reframe the focus on Christian values, and biblical principles directly influence the founding of the United States and Western civilization. Of course, again, there's a wall of separation between church and state, as we described from Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist earlier in the show. And also there's the Treaty of Tripoli, which was negotiated by, I think, Washington, or negotiated by Adams and signed by Jefferson. It's either negotiated by Washington and signed by Adams, or negotiated by Adams and signed by Jefferson, and then ratified by the Senate, most of whom were rightly called founding fathers. So all of these people signed this Treaty of Tripoli, which said that the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion. So, and a treaty under the Constitution has the force and effect of law. So they are basically passing a legal statement that we were not founded on a Christian religion. So Christian influences that directly influence the founding of the United States, I'd say nay, nay. because the idea that you can follow your own path and your own deity, as was described in Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists, is not an idea that's a Christian idea. Because Christianity, especially evangelical Christians, like the type who are passing these types of laws, wants people to be forced to be Christian, I guess. Cutting world history and cultures. The current 6th grade world cultures course has been eliminated entirely. Lessons about history outside of European traditions have been minimized so that schools can spend more time exclusively on U.S. and Texas history. So they don't give a shit about the rest of the world, just Eurocentric ideas, which, is why we say that we live in a white supremacist society and that the MAGA GOP type folks are a bunch of white supremacists, because they don't want you learning about other cultures. Other cultures, and learning about other cultures is how you become a more well-rounded person. I mean, eating how I became a more well-rounded person, but anyway, let's continue. Removing minority and diversity standards. Of course, they hate DEI, even though they can't really define what DEI is. The board cut out several standards that required students to analyze history from multiple perspectives. They've removed lessons on how Jim Crow laws maintain segregation. What? Like, that is a vital part of our history, to learn how Jim Crow laws maintain segregation. Oh, but the white, like DeSantis is DeSantis is Florida, but the arguments that are made by these DeSantis and Abbott types are like, oh, but, these white children are going to be made to feel ashamed for being white. Why would they not feel a kindred spirit with the people who were white who fought to free the slaves? Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. He was white. So why would the white kids felt like they, more identified with the plantation owners and the Jim Crow South politicians? Maybe because their parents are sitting there flying Confederate flags and saying the South shall rise again, or some other bullshit, or, complain about, the tearing down of Confederate statues. Maybe that's why these children will identify more with Confederates than they do with American patriots, because their parents are likely Confederate sympathizers and Confederate wannabes. And again, when they say MAGA, the America they're talking about is the Confederate States of America. So they also changed the name of the Tulsa Race Massacre to the Tulsa Race Riots, and removed sociology requirements that taught students to analyze the mistreatment of minority groups. Because why wouldn't they? Again, this is how you put in white supremacist ideas, and this is how you grow future white supremacists and future neo-Nazis. Reducing other religions past standards that highlighted the contributions of other religions, such as Muslim advancements in algebra and astronomy, were deleted from the curriculum. Somebody should try and pass a law saying that we can no longer teach in Arabic numerals either. Because conservatives are stupid when they, are asked that question, because they don't understand that Arabic numbers are the numbers that we use. But hey, Donald Trump did say after the 2016 Nevada primaries that he loved the poorly educated. So again, these are going to hit Texas classrooms during the 2030 and 2031 school year. Critics have argued that this is government-sponsored favoritism of religion. The list exclusively mandates Bible passages and leaves out holy texts from other religions. Like it deals with the Christian aspects of the Bible and the Quran. It's probably not going to deal with Jewish thought. You're not going to learn the Mishnah or the Talmud. The state is practicing religious favoritism, directly violates the Establishment Clause, which requires public schools to stay religiously neutral. Teaching religion versus teaching about religion, which is what this is doing. Violating the free exercise. And then, of course, there's flawed opt-out options. So Texas does allow parents to opt their kids out of specific readings. The critics are going to argue that this is not enough because they claim it alienates and marginalizes non-Christian children, making them feel like outsiders in their own classroom. Because, you're the one, let's say you're the one Jewish kid in the school or the one Muslim kid in the school, and your parents are like, well, I don't want you learning about, anything from Ecclesiastes, or I don't want you learning the Sermon on the Mount. I don't want that to be part of your education. But then what happens when you get tested on it? And then what happens when the kid's like, well, why didn't you go to class today? Oh, because I'm Jewish. And then they'll be like, oh, and then it becomes a othering of people instead of fostering a a feeling of community amongst all the students for just being peers in the same peer group. Of course, there's also a list of arguments for the curriculum by the supporters, and we obviously don't support these ideas, but proponents argue that you cannot truly understand Western literature, like U.S. history or the foundation of American law, without understanding the Bible. Supreme Court precedent does allow schools to use the Bible if the purpose is strictly educational, history, or literary, but clearly what's being worded here is not strictly educational, historical, or literary. They're pushing Christian supremacy and Christian white supremacy above all that too. The so-called passive reading defense, supporters will rely on recent legal wins. For example, the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most overturned court of appeals, at least maybe before this activist conservative Supreme Court, upheld a separate Texas law requiring classrooms to display the Ten Commandments. Of course, displaying the Ten Commandments is not necessarily, as bad as this. It's bad, in my opinion, but it's not necessarily as bad as what they're intending to do now. But again, them allowing the Ten Commandments to come in just gets their foot in the door so that they can continue doing this bullshit. And supposedly it's a balance list, and that the Bible makes up only a tiny fraction of the 200 required texts because it is integrated with secular works like William Shakespeare and Jane Austen. They argue it is a well-rounded secular educational tool. It's not a secular educational tool if you're trying to teach how Christianity helped form and shape the nation. When, again, the letter from the Danbury Baptist clearly says that there is a wall of separation between church and state, and the Treaty of Tripoli says that we are not founded at all on the Christian religion. So there you go. Big Hook. Damn, your stream is very smooth. Must be the new computer. Must be. And it is. I mean, and look, the image, I think my image is better too, right? I look even better. Anyway, so if you like this video, like, share, subscribe, and of course, make sure to, have a good day. I should word that better. Let me word that better for the purpose of this recording video. If you like this video, make sure to share and subscribe, and also make sure to have a good night. I should say it differently as well. Let's do it one more time. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow Liberal Dan Radio for more talk from the left. That's right. That works better. Haven't done that in a while. So, see, MJ Daniel, their own state-approved Christianity. Anything else not welcome. Some great religious freedom there. Exactly. Well stated. If I was able to use Restream, I would absolutely, with this setup currently, I would have absolutely highlighted that message. But unfortunately, as we learned during yesterday's test shows, it doesn't, the OBS, when used as a virtual camera, cannot connect in to Restream like that. I'm wondering if there's an actual connection that you can make to Restream from OBS. Wondering if that's an option as well. Maybe I'll test that out for the next day. We'll see. But I'm not as concerned about that. I'm just happy that I have the computer and I can make a much better podcast with a much clearer image of myself, and I can do live reactions now, finally. So, anyway, Christine, beer at back, need another beer. Get me one while you're at it, please. I'd appreciate another something to drink, especially when dealing with this bullshit. Pam Matthews, they should only be reading Bible passages in Bible study club after school. Yep. 100% agree. If students want to form a Bible study club and they want to learn the Bible and, study it and look about it upon themselves. And if they want to bring up these issues, fine, more power to you. But then you should also allow them to have a Muslim student club and a Jewish student club, or maybe you can have a religious unity club as well, right? Thank you, Christine. What beer are you drinking, by the way? I did hear a funny joke from a funny comedian. Was it Adolf Coors? Was it the person who started Anheuser-Busch and the person that started Guinness? All went to a bar, then went to a beer convention, and they all went to a bar afterwards. And the guy that founded Anheuser-Busch said, "I'm going to have a Budweiser." And the guy that started Coors, I think his name is Adolf Coors, goes, "I'll have a Coors Light." And then the guy that started Guinness said, "Well, I'm going to have a Coca-Cola." And the other two are like, "Wait, why are you ordering a Coca-Cola?" And the founder of Guinness is like, "Well, if y'all aren't going to drink a beer, then if y'all aren't drinking beer, then I'm not going to drink beer either." Anyway, thought it was a funny joke. Let's talk about this for a second. See, I just had a PET scan. I'm supposed to flush my kidneys. 8.1% hurricane. Nice. So it's not even a beer. It's a hurricane. Even better. So, have y'all heard about what's going on with the so-called refugees, the white refugees from South Africa? Because I saw this and I was just like mind blown as to the ridiculousness of this. According to internal planning documents that the New York Times first confirmed, and then was also confirmed by multiple outlets as well, the Trump administration plans to give away to newly arrived white South African, primarily Afrikaner refugees, a government-funded welcome bag that is well beyond the normal orientation materials that are traditionally given to refugees. So, first you get an Android tablet. Now, I don't know why you need to have an Android tablet, but, you know, those are probably available very cheap. You could probably order some, you know, from China that you could, you know, paint gold and rebrand as, you know, Trump's name on it because you would normally do it. But still, it's kind of weird that they would get a tablet. A U.S. flag. I'm not mad that they get a U.S. flag. That's fine. Copy of the U.S. Constitution. Fine. If you're coming to the United States, you know, it's good to know the laws. Copy of the Declaration of Independence. Fine. Then a welcome letter, encouraging newcomers to assimilate into American culture, speak English, and embrace American traditions. Refugees are coming here because they're refugees. So if they're really refugees, I don't think your focus and your priority should be, make sure you assimilate. No, it should, you know, be, make sure you come here. I hope you're safe, and I hope you're happy. I hope, you know, the fact that, you know, maybe that we're welcoming to refugees, but now this administration is only welcoming to white refugees because he's said on record before that, you know, he wants fewer refugees from like Africa and Haiti and more refugees from like Norway or Finland. But as we read in the Supreme Court ruling, where the Supreme Court justices were like, well, that wasn't overtly racial. The fuck it wasn't. So there's more of this, but then there's race and history materials. The materials include children's books arguing that white South Africans face systemic discrimination, reading materials asserting that South Africa's post-apartheid government favors black South Africans at the expense of white South Africans, educational content produced by PragerU, material presenting a revisionist interpretation of the American Civil Rights Movement and slavery, according to critics of it, and content portraying Nelson Mandela in a highly critical light. Specifically regarding race relations, the reporting indicates the PragerU materials include themes such as the idea that discrimination against white people is now a significant societal problem. Hilarious. These materials also include arguments that affirmative action and similar policies constitute anti-white discrimination. Hilarious. Claims that South Africa's racial equity policies unfairly target whites. Oh, why is that? Because when the white families, the Afrikaners, stole the black families' farms, and now the government is trying to get those farms back into the families that they once belonged into, that's unfair to the white people. Yes, you're unfair to the children and grandchildren of criminals. Ridiculous. Again, grandfather's watch idea. If your grandfather stole my grandfather's watch, and then after they both pass away and we're hanging out and I see this watch, I'm like, can I see the inside of your watch real quick? And I look at the inside of the watch and it has my grandfather's name on it or whatever. You should have to give that back to me because that belongs in my family, not yours. And I think the law would support that idea, right? So then why wouldn't the same apply to farms stolen? The Prager University materials also include educational videos and reading materials minimizing or reframing aspects of American slavery and South African apartheid. So, yeah. You know, like maybe things like what Ron DeSantis said about how when you had slavery, it taught people who were the enslaved a job or how to do work and how to labor. Yeah, whatever. It's bullshit. Most slaves didn't make it out of slavery. And those that did had to deal with the racist policies of the Jim Crow South. and beyond. So critics, again, have objected to this. Refugee groups, including refugees from Afghanistan, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, generally received practical assistance rather than ideological reading material. The administration largely suspended refugee admissions from most countries while making an exception for these Afrikaners, and refugee organizations argued the welcome bags appeared designed to reinforce the administration's political message about race rather than simply helping refugees settle into the United States. Again, that's the point I made. The Trump administration has defended admitting the Afrikaners by arguing they face so-called racial discrimination, so-called violence, and threats to their property in South Africa. Of course, if their property was stolen from black people from South Africa, then it's not stolen to return it to them. South African government, numerous scholars of South Africa, and independent fact-checking organizations dispute the claims of the Trump administration. They argue there's no evidence of a state-sponsored genocide against white South Africans. They acknowledge that South Africa suffers from high levels of violent crime, affecting people of many racial backgrounds. So again, the administration unfortunately has not released a complete official inventory of every book, video, and app that ended up in the welcome kits, because I'm sure these tablets are probably preloaded with, I guess, some of those, e-materials or whatever. Maybe there's some e-books and some videos that come preloaded onto these tablets. Maybe that was the most efficient way. Instead of giving them like 100 books, you give them a tablet that has that on it, which maybe makes the tablet make sense for convenience and efficiency's sake, but it's still stupid to give them the tablet with all of this propaganda on it. So one of the things that was identified was the book Lwazi's Hard Lesson. It is the centerpiece of the reported packet. PragerU markets it primarily to middle and high school students. The story follows a black South African student named Lwazi. He becomes friends with a white Afrikaner rugby player. The story builds towards racial violence in which Lwazi ultimately protects his white teammate from a black mob. Messages about South Africa. The book argues that post-apartheid South Africa has replaced one form of racial discrimination with another, which is bullshit. Among the reported passages are government policies favoring the black population over everyone else have made race relations even worse. Continues by arguing corruption in employment and violence targeting the white minority. Corruption, unemployment, and violence targeting the white minority threaten the Rainbow's Nation hard-won independence or hard-won achievements. The book also states affirmative action has resulted in black South Africans being promoted because of race rather than competence, which again is the typical Trump DEI falsehood, the false explanation of what DEI does. Those passages mirror, again, arguments commonly made by conservatives about South Africa's economic empowerment policies that, help black people, come from the discrimination to where they are now. And, of course, critics of these books say that they omit broader historical context of apartheid and ongoing economic disparities. They portray Nelson Mandela. One of the most discussed passages says Nelson Mandela was a South African lawyer and activist who sought to end apartheid with acts of sabotage. I'm telling all of y'all it's a sabotage, at least that's what they're saying. But in reality, he was an oppressed person. Statement is factually rooted, supposedly, in the historical record that Mandela co-founded an armed resistance organization that carried out sabotage against government infrastructure. However, that is only half the story. It doesn't mention his decades of imprisonment, leadership in negotiating the peaceful end of apartheid, or his presidency. So it gives them an incomplete picture. And of course, again, as we discussed earlier in the show, if you're somebody dealing with oppression and speaking about said oppression doesn't stop the oppression, then those people who are unheard are going to use more drastic measures. And then that's not the fault of the people who are oppressed. That's the fault of the oppressors. The book also references Elon Musk, describing him as a worldwide business icon. I mean, I guess he's the first trillionaire, so yeah, he is a worldwide business icon, but why even mention him in this book? And then it says that people such as Musk warned of a potential genocide against white people, which again is bullshit. PragerU videos on the tablets. According to the reporting, Android tablets were expected to include the PragerU app, giving refugees access to PragerU's library of videos. The specific playlist was not disclosed. Based on the packet themes, journalists indicated the available content emphasized topics as American exceptionalism, civic education centered on the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. Of course, is probably the flawed view of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence of PragerU and people like them. Criticisms of DEI, arguments against affirmative action, videos questioning whether or not systemic racism exists, and whether or not is a dominant explanation for contemporary disparities, which it is, conservative interpretations of American history and the civil rights movement. Again, no public inventory has confirmed exactly what videos were preloaded or highlighted, but I've only ever watched one PragerU University video that has ever been factually correct. And that one video is the one that they have on slavery that a military officer, a uniformed military person, I don't know if he's retired or not, but he was basically describing that the Civil War was fought specifically over the topic of slavery. And I was like, wait, this is PragerU? This is Prager. What the hell is this doing on PragerU? Because it doesn't fit the rest of their bullshit. Of course, this is why I have Liberal DanU, which hopefully now that I have a new computer with all my software back on it again, I'll be able to start making some more Liberal DanU videos as well. There is a Liberal DanU playlist over on liberaldanradio.com, the YouTube channel. Go check it out if you want to see some of my initial videos that are under the Liberal DanU moniker. And then, of course, another reported inclusion was the 1776 report, produced during Trump's first administration. And of course, the report was created as a response to the 1619 Project. Major themes include America should primarily be taught as an exceptional nation, ignoring, I guess, all the bullshit that we've done in the past, that schools place too much emphasis on slavery and discrimination. Well, white supremacists would think that any emphasis on slavery and discrimination would be too much, in my opinion at least. That progressive identity politics undermine national unity. Well, maybe the fact that we have discrimination against, certain identities, maybe it's the discrimination itself that's causing the undermining of national unity. And, the people that are trying to use the so-called progressive identity politics are doing so because they want to fix the problem so that we can be united in a non-bigoted country. I know, terrible of me to say, right, that we should want that. And that also includes that the founders' commitment to liberty ultimately laid the groundwork for ending slavery, even though the founders owned slaves, counted black people as 3/5 of a person, not as votes, but to allow the South to, get more of a say based on their population, but not their voting population. So they should be counted as full people, and they should have had the right to vote, and they shouldn't be enslaved. So, hey. Additional proposed material includes, and this is rich, a children's biography of Donald Trump, a children's biography of Andrew Jackson, and a report on religious liberty from the Family Research Council discussing legal disputes involving businesses declining services for same-sex weddings. Ridiculous. This is basically just all propaganda. This is like Joseph Goebbels would have been proud. Goebbels would have been absolutely proud of this. It was like, I should have done something similar. That sounded more Russian. I'm sorry. Again, themes running through the packet. White South Africans are now victims of significant racial discrimination, supposedly. Post-apartheid policies have created reverse discrimination, which is not a thing. American history should emphasize national ideals over systemic critiques of racism. Our national ideals should be an inclusion of systemic critiques of racism. That should be part of our national ideas, not this bullshit. And of course, they're going to say that DEI and affirmative action are presented as forms of racial discrimination, and American civic identity is framed around assimilation into a shared national traditions. No, we're a melting pot of shared cultures, kind of more like a gumbo or a jambalaya of lots of different flavors all together, and those different flavors in combination make us great. We don't want to water down everybody else's culture by having them assimilate to what Donald Trump thinks our culture should be. Yeah, orb rumor, exactly. The old gay wedding cake dispute. So yeah, I would love to be able to get my hands on one of these damn things so we could actually see what exactly is on them. So if you have access to one, send it to me. Email me at liberaldanradio@gmail.com and let me know if you have access either to the list of everything that's on this, on these tablets, or better yet, get me a tablet get me a tablet itself and let me see it. Now, I'm wondering, though, one of the things I'm wondering, if they're giving them a tablet, is it going to have tracking software in it so they can track the people as well? Or will they only provide such tracking software to non-whites? Just a question to think about. Anyway, can we put the Heritage Foundation on trial for sedition? Sure. I mean, we should put lots of people on trial for sedition. Like, the people that Trump pardoned should have gotten charged and convicted of sedition. Because they're treason. They are traitors to this country. All right, so now it's time to talk about the Supreme Court rulings. SCOTUS RULING. That doesn't work. Anyway, just splashed myself in the face with water. Anyway, so lots of different things we're going to talk about, which includes, let's see, this ruling. Let me scroll up and down or whatever. This is the, yeah, that's this. Let me scroll back down as well, just to get back down to this. So, this is the first of 4 videos that we'll be making on these Supreme Court rulings, and I think at least 3 of them are going to discuss Alito and how stupid of a Supreme Court justice he is. And we're going to be talking about Okello T. Chathri, the petitioner, versus the United States of America. And we're going to look at this ruling. And the text is here. We're looking directly at the ruling, but to basically, and we're not going to, highlight the entirety of the text. I'm not going to go through it with, a fine-tooth comb, but we are going to look at some of the words that Justice Alito said, and maybe we'll make it just a little bigger, just so it can be more easily read. But basically, the idea of the court is this, and the court ruled, I think, correctly, because this wasn't even a final determination of the end of this case. This case had to do with whether or not the police asking Google for phone records or tracking data that was created by a person's cell phone, if that constitutes a search. Does that constitute a search? The majority said yes, it constitutes a search because it's private information obtained from their private device. And I think that's the right ruling. But Alito disagrees. Alito doesn't believe that it is a search, even though they were literally searching for information that was created by his phone and then stored on a server. It's identifiable information, especially when it pertains to linking his phone and his actions to his phone's, ID, hardware ID. Justice Alito, 8 years ago, I warned that this court's decision in Carpenter versus the United States would produce one of 2 outcomes. Either the court would need to clarify Carpenter's limits, or Carpenter would usher in revolutionary developments in our doctrine by giving criminal suspects a protected Fourth Amendment interest in any sensitive personal information about them that is collected and owned by third parties. Again, that comes from his dissent. I'm always amused when Supreme Court justices try and write an opinion based on another opinion that was already shown to be wrong by the rest of the court. So Clarence Thomas does this a bunch too. He loves to cite himself and his own dissents. Today, the court takes the country down the latter path. In doing so, the court sheds Carpenter's self-imposed boundaries and further destabilizes long-standing Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. Again, this is rich and hypocritical coming from Justice Alito, who said during his hearings that he believed in stare decisis and then has voted to overturn things like, Roe v. Wade. He often talks about, but he also does things like he likes to look at other things like traditions, and he does appeals to tradition in his arguments, but appeal to tradition is a logical fallacy. To make matters worse, according to Alito, the majority does all this in an advisory opinion. Today's decision will send seismic waves throughout our Fourth Amendment doctrine. Yes, seismic waves. Way to be a drama queen there, Alito. Not one iota of the majority opinion will affect the outcome of this case. The court knows this and does not claim otherwise. Instead, by refusing to review the one question that should have at least been theoretically given Chattree some hopes of relief, the court carefully set the stage for its planned performance, striking a pose as a great champion of privacy in the digital age. I cannot support this irresponsible escapade. He doesn't believe the court should have granted cert in the case under any faithful application of our precedents. When do you believe in precedent, Alito? Now you want to believe in precedent, but you reject it many other times before. Court issues an advisory opinion concerning how a now obsolete geofence procedure. Last term, the court worried out loud about rushing in to judge new technologies with transformative capabilities. In TikTok versus Garland, in cases involving such technology, the court proclaimed we should take care to not embarrass the future. We shouldn't embarrass the future, but saying that the data stored in a third-party server is not somehow protected is ridiculous. Like, Europe, he loves to point to European traditions and European laws. Europe does a great job, a much better job of protecting people's personal private information. You sign an agreement, or they sign an agreement with you, or whatever. You agree when you're using the thing that they will store the information, but you are granted the ability in Europe to have them take down any piece of personally identifying information. And I would argue that if this is your phone, anything that, connects you to that phone and your phone's data is personally identifiable, especially as it pertains to your movements around. It's long established that federal courts may not issue, quote, advisory opinions that do not bear on the rights of litigants before them, but it does bear on the rights of the litigants before them, because the right to not have yourself improperly searched. And in order for the court to determine whether or not somebody was improperly searched, the court has to determine whether or not this is actually a search or not. And that's what this court did. This court said this is a search, and therefore the lower court may now determine whether or not the search was appropriate or not, or reasonable or not. At the appellate stage, this principle means that courts should only resolve those questions which would provide a favorable ruling and will give a litigant redress from the judgment below. But if it's a search that's deemed to be unreasonable, then it would be inadmissible and therefore cannot be used in the conviction of somebody of a crime. So therefore, it could very well prevent a conviction, which would then end up in a favorable ruling. So I don't know what the hell Alito's talking about, but again, he's a fucking moron. Thank you, David, for becoming a liberal Danimal. Appreciate your support. The ongoing stake in this case stems from his conviction for robbing a bank and brandishing a firearm. On appeal, he challenged those convictions on one ground. He argued the district court erred in denying his motion to suppress the fruits of the geofence procedure that led to his identification as the bank robber. So unless he can show that this evidence should be suppressed, he cannot obtain any relief. But again, fruits of the forbidden tree are not allowed to be put as testimony, and as such, he would get away with it because they used fruits from a forbidden tree. And just because Alito says that his chances of making the showing needed to justify suppression are zero, doesn't make it so. Police obtained the information about his location at the time of the robbery pursuant to a warrant issued by a neutral magistrate. When the evidence is obtained under such a warrant, the defendant seeking suppression must overcome the good faith exception to the exclusionary rule. Good faith. This is the same Supreme Court that basically said that an officer who gets the law wrong in searching somebody, like for example, there was a case where the court stopped somebody. I think it was called a Terry stop. The court stopped somebody for having a busted taillight, or the cop busted somebody or stopped somebody for having a busted taillight. Used that pullover as a reason to search the vehicle. We discussed on a previous show why such searches unfortunately target minorities more often, even though white folks are more likely to have contraband in many municipalities, in many areas. But still, point is that the police officer pulled the person over for having a single taillight, believing in his mind that the single taillight was a violation of the law that required them to give a ticket or enabled him to give a ticket. The law in the state that they're in says you can have one broken taillight. You just can't have two. But it didn't matter to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, well, as long as he believed he was acting in good faith, we should allow it. which is bullshit. You shouldn't have been able to pull over the person because the person wasn't committing a crime. Therefore, the search would have never happened. It should be considered a fruit of the forbidden tree. But this Supreme Court, this conservative activist Supreme Court, loves to be able to, keep people in prison who shouldn't be in prison. And they love to help out law enforcement do just that. The purpose of having a good, trial court system, a good court system, a system of justice, includes a requirement that the prosecution only submit evidence that can be used, and to suppress and deny information that shouldn't be used. And you shouldn't be making it easier for the police to get away with using information that shouldn't be used. So on this score today, the majority does not dispute the Fourth Circuit's good faith analysis, and nothing in its opinion casts a shred of doubt that holding to overcome the good faith exception, he'd need to show that either the affidavit supporting the geofence warrant was knowingly or recklessly false, the magistrate rubber stamped the warrant application, or the affidavit was bare bones, or the warrant application was so facially deficient that no reasonable officer would rely on it. But again, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about whether or not this is a search. And I think it's important to determine and to establish that this was a search. And therefore, the lower court can then determine whether or not the search was reasonable or not. And if the court determines that the search was reasonable, then the guy goes to jail, or the guy goes to prison. If it was unreasonable, then fruit of the forbidden tree. But Alito doesn't care about whether or not it's reasonable or not. He just cares about whether or not people acted in good faith. So to Alito, as long as you had good intentions, it's fine to violate the law. As long as you have good intentions, it's fine to violate somebody's constitutional protections. That's why Alito is one of the dumbest Supreme Court justices in the history of this Supreme Court. And if you want to see more reasons why Justice Alito is the dumbest justice ever on the Supreme Court, you should follow Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube, and you should also subscribe, get notifications, like this video, share it, and then go find the playlist where I discuss all of his other horrible rulings. Have a good day. Anyway, again, we're not ending the show right now. This is just the end of this one recorded video. We're going to go on to the next one now. Let me head back into the chat room or whatever, just to see what's going on, just so I don't miss anything. See what Orb Rumor says. You have more ingredients than a Red Hot Chili Pepper song, or whoever that 90s band was. Well, we don't like the Red Hot Chili Peppers here on Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from Life, that's right. We used to love their music a lot, but then we found out that Anthony Kiedis admitted to statutory rape in his book or whatever, because he admitted to sleeping with somebody underage, and then once he found out, he did it again. At least that's according to my recollection of what I read about the book. I never actually read the book itself. And so, yeah, we don't listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers anymore, because we don't listen to people who act like that. So, let's see. Alito believes in bullshit exceptions. When the police are involved, police lie almost as much as Alito. I might even argue that police lie more often than Alito, but he just feels a kindred spirit with them because they're both a bunch of fucking liars. All right, so now we got Watson versus the Republican National Committee. Oh, I'm scrolling the wrong thing at this point. Hold on, because I think I need to... This is not the one with the ridiculous thing that I wanted to show first. The Supreme Court ruled today in Watson versus the Republican National Committee that you can count mail-in ballots that were postmarked by Election Day by whatever date that the state says that they're going to count it by. Yeah. What the Supreme Court ruling did not do, one thing that it did not do was it did not say that all states must count mail-in ballots after Election Day. What it says is that states who choose to count mail-in ballots after Election Day may continue to do so, despite the complaints and the arguments by Republicans and Trump and whatever who don't seem to like it and think that it opens up the door for fraud, even though there's no evidence that these mail-in ballots that are counted late have any more fraud in them than the mail-in ballots from beforehand, or that mail-in ballots is at all fraudulent altogether. Period. So again, the court made the correct ruling in this case by allowing states that choose to count mail-in ballots after Election Day to continue to count those mail-in ballots. So good. But Alito is, of course, one of the dissenters, because Justice Alito is one of the dumbest, or not the, if not the dumbest, Supreme Court justice that has ever served on the court. Federal law designates, or let's expand this so it's more easily read, shall we? Federal law designates the Tuesday next after the first Monday in November as Election Day, and provides that elections for federal office must be held on that date. Yes, the elections must be held on that date. It does not require, however, that all the ballots be counted by that date. Just heard a weird thing with my thing, let me just play a little thing right now. Play Aaron's air horn. No, maybe I'll just do the drum roll. Let's just see if it's, oh, I can hear. I just had a little bit of beeping in my ear, so I was trying to make sure that the thing was working right. I'll edit this out of this video, if I remember. If I don't, get a good chuckle while watching this video. Anyway, as the court explains, an election is the expression of the electorate's choice. But because the electorate is a collective body consisting of many individuals, the way in which it expresses its choice is less straightforward than would be the case if the electorate were a single individual. If the electorate were an individual, it could issue a document declaring that specified men and women were selected to fill the federal offices for which the candidates have competed. But because the electorate is a collective body, it cannot express its elections that way. What the hell does that even mean? It's ridiculous. Instead, its choices are embodied in a collection of ballots cast by the individuals who make up the electorate. Well, no shit. Taken all together, this collection is the equivalent of a single document declaring the winner of each race. This expression of the electorate's choice is conveyed to the responsible election officials when the collection of the individual ballots is completed. Of course, because it's completed, the collection is completed doesn't necessarily mean it's collected. And there are many other examples that we can talk about as we go into Alito's whatever. I'm sure he's going to touch on things that we'll be able to correct. So we'll handle certain issues as we read it. I didn't read the entire thing, but I skimmed it a little bit. At that point, the electorate authoritatively expresses its choices unless, the Supreme Court decides it's going to, overturn the choices of, Florida or whatever, like they did in 2000. The election day statuses demand this is the authoritative choice to be made on election day. And I would argue that something that is mailed on election day or by election day is a choice made on election day. We also have early voting. So we also have plenty of opportunities to vote before election day. And if we make those choices before election day, those votes are no less valid than the votes made on election day. So clearly that's an example of why you don't need to actually have a ballot received on election day for it to matter on election day. You can cast it beforehand. And it can be counted. And if the state says as long as it's mailed by the election day, that as long as it appears and shows up by a certain cutoff point, then it will also be counted. If ballots received after election day are added to the set of ballots that dictate the election's outcome, the electorate's choices does not occur on election day, and the federal election day statutes are violated. What? That makes no fucking sense. The reason you want to make sure that the vote is sent by election day, on election day, postmarked on election day or before, is because simply you don't want people voting after the networks make their calls. You don't want to give people, I need to go vote now because it's, no, if you vote the day after election day, if you mail in the day after election day, it's too late. But on election day, you're making the same decision that everybody made on election day and all during early voting. Absentee voting or in-person early voting or whatever. In this case, Alito says, we must apply this interpretation of federal election day statutes to a Mississippi law that requires state election officials to accept ballots that arrive up to 5 days after election day. No, you mustn't. I don't know why you believe we must, but that is not a requirement. The acceptance of these late arriving ballots effectively postpones the date on which the electorate choice is made. No, it does not. That is a stupid statement made by the stupidest Supreme Court justice in the history of the Supreme Court. The electorate choices was made, even on mail-in ballots received afterwards, the choice was still made on election day or before, as long as the vote was postmarked on election day or before. The person is absolutely making a decision at the same time everybody else is making that decision. The fact that you count it later. There are some places with paper ballots that might count the votes later as well, the day after election day. Those votes counted. I understand that Donald Trump wants to stop the counting. You got to stop the counting so I can win. He wants the counting to stop on election day, but if you have more votes that need to be counted than what you can handle counting on election day, then guess what? Counting goes and takes place. So the idea that to have to be counted on that day is ridiculous, or submitted by that day is also ridiculous, because the counting, you don't finish counting for a couple of days and you don't know the choice for a couple of days. So what harm is it in counting those ballots that were postmarked on election day or before but happened to arrive after? Alito says for more than 100 years, federal law has designated the Tuesday after next Monday, the first Monday in November, as the day on which United States senators and members of House of Representatives are elected. Similarly, federal law has long provided the electors of president and vice president shall be appointed on that date as well. And because the appointment of electors in each state now are decided by popular vote, the voters express their preferences for president on that same date. Mississippi law allows some voters to cast absentee ballots and provides that voters may submit these ballots to election officials by mail or common carrier. To be counted, absentee ballots must be postmarked by election day. Again, they made their choice the same day or before, just like everybody else who either votes on election day or votes early made their choices the same day or before, same group of people. So it must receive them no later than 5 days after the election. So if you mail in an absentee ballot on election day and it doesn't get there till 6 days after, tough luck. But ballots arriving after that date shall not be counted. Question is, we must decide, that he says, is whether the provision allowing the receipt of absentee ballot votes after the election day is consistent with federal law. As noted, the federal election day statutes provide that elections for federal office must occur on a specified date. This may seem like a simple rule, but we must address the several issues to understand exactly what it means. Cast a ballot on election day or before. But if it means that you must have a vote, if you must hold the election on that day, then how do you have any absentee ballots at all? If it means that you must have the election on that day, how do you have early voting? If you must have it on that day, then all the other forms of voting except for same-day in-person elections should be null and void. And Alito isn't making that argument, so his argument is dumb. The first is the meaning of the term election, used in the election day statutes. The majority states that the term election means the expression of the electorate's choice, and I agree with that definition. Well, good for you, Alito. You agree with the definition of a word. Mazel tov. Second issue is the identification of the acts that constitute the electorate's expression of its choice, and those acts are the final submission and collection of ballots. These acts, therefore, occur on election day. No, they don't, dummy, because they occur for as long as you have early voting. And as long as you mail in the early votes. So even if you required them to arrive on election day, the votes were cast prior to election day. So therefore, they're not occurring on election day. This is what the election day statutes required when all voting occurred in person, and the same requirement applies today. Again, an appeal to tradition by Justice Alito, one of his favorite logical fallacies. Back when all voting occurred in person, the voters went to the polls on election day. Yes, and now they don't. Good. They then completed ballots and turned them over to election officials. When the polls closed, those officials had in their possession a fixed collection of ballots and taken together. So again, an appeal to tradition, not an appeal to any sort of logical argument. That expression of the electorate's choice having been made, the election day statutes did not require that anything more be done before midnight on election day. Of course, no one could know the outcome of the election until those ballots were examined and the valid ballots were counted, but it was not necessary for those steps to be finished on election day because the electorate's choices had been authoritatively expressed. So you don't have to count them and finish the counting on election day. So if the state of Mississippi says, we're going to finish counting 5 days, that's the deadline to finish counting, 5 days after election day. That's when we're going to finish counting. What's the deal? Today, not all voting occurs in person on election day. Both voting by mail and early voting have become popular, and respondents do not dispute the lawfulness of these modern practices, nor do I. Which makes your argument even more stupid. If you're citing the fact that we used to do all voting on in person and on election day, but you're not disputing the lawfulness of the modern practices, then why are you disputing the lawfulness of the receipt by the state of those votes as long as they were cast by election day? inclusive of Election Day. But acceptance of these practices cannot change the fact that under federal law, the electorate's collective choice must still be authoritatively expressed on Election Day, and it is when they mail it by Election Day or on Election Day, because they're doing it, drum roll please, on Election Day. That requirement is met in a jurisdiction with mail voting or early voting, provided the critical act occurs on Election Day. Yes, the critical act is the casting of the ballot, i.e. the mailing of the ballot, and not the counting or the receipt of the ballot. The completion of the collection of ballots that embody the electorate's collective choices. This is what took place when all voting was done in person. Again, another appeal to tradition, another logical fallacy. Court disagrees and concludes that Election Day statutes merely require that each individual cast a vote on or before Election Day, but if that is all that the Election Day statutes require, there is no sense in which the electorate as a whole can be seen as making its choice on Election Day. Again, the most stupidest Supreme Court justice that ever lived. Rather, the electorate's choice would be made piecemeal over an extended period prior to Election Day. It is! It already is, and you're not saying that that shouldn't be. It's already made piecemeal over an extended period prior to Election Day. That's what early voting is, you dumb piece of shit. Election Day is a specified date, not a span of multiple days. But again, you're not saying that early voting is wrong or should be made illegal, so therefore, this argument is dumb. Dumb, 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 dumb. Under the challenged Mississippi law, however, the collection of ballots continues for 5 more days, and it's existed for at least 2 weeks, if not longer, beforehand. I'm not sure exactly how Mississippi's laws, we have 8 days of early voting, not counting Sundays. So we are allowed to vote early. Again, those ballots are not being cast on Election Day. So therefore, it's a longer period of time than the 24 hours of Election Day. Federal law requires that election occur on Election Day. It preempts Mississippi statute. But if federal election law doesn't preempt early voting or mail-in votes that were sent in early that are received by Election Day, then why would it preempt mail-in ballots that were mailed by Election Day and received 5 days afterwards? Again, makes no fucking sense. This conclusion finds support in legal authorities from the period when the federal Election Day statutes were enacted. Again, appeal to tradition. Legal dictionaries of the era described an election as including both the casting and receipt of ballots. But again, we allow for early voting, and Alito allows for early voting, so therefore we've moved on from that old definition of election. Contemporary state statutes likewise provided that an election was not finished or closed until polls closed, which point poll workers stopped accepting ballots. Indeed, under 19th century election law parlance, a voter's presentation of a complete ballot constituted a mere offer to vote, and it was not said that the person had voted until an election official took custody of the ballot. But again, just because that's how they did it back then, it doesn't mean that's how we should do it today. Appeal to tradition, logical fallacy. State court decisions from the era corroborate this interpretation, but state court decisions can be wrong. When certain statutes pegged certain legal consequences to an election or voting, courts held that ballot receipt triggered these consequences, and ballot receipt can trigger those consequences, including Mississippi, who says the receipt can take place up to 5 days afterwards. Thank you, Printed Vicon, for being a liberal danimal for 24 months, a wild danimal for 24 months even. So, love you, time to eat nacho, night, peace. Have a great one, Primitive Icon. Appreciate you for being a wild animal. Anyway, for example, Pennsylvania court held that a 10-day limitation period for contesting the outcome of a race began once the officials closed the polls on election night. Okay. That doesn't have any bearing on Mississippi law because state laws differ. State election laws differ from state to state to state. Some states do full mail-in voting or full mail-in or drop-off voting. Other states have a mix. Other states have longer early voting. Other states have shorter early voting because states are different and can have different sets of laws as long as they fundamentally uphold the idea, ideally at least, that, every vote is counted and one person, one vote. Pfft, that's not happening these days because of gerrymandering and all the other bullshit, but, the constitutional requirements are a minimum that have to be protected, but then states can then, adjust accordingly to the needs of the state at hand. Similarly, when the Supreme Court of Alabama resolved the charge that a defendant illegally voted, the court held that the defendant could not be found liable unless there was evidence that his ballot had been received by a poll worker and placed in a ballot box. Okay, that has nothing to do with this. 2 centuries of historical practice, again, another repeal of tradition, reinforced this proposition that holding an election on a particular day means that poll workers had to receive the ballots by that date. No, but you just said earlier in your argument that holding an election and receiving the votes earlier on that date and by that date are 2 different things. Like, holding an election on a date is not the same thing as receiving the ballots by the date. From this century's founding to the late 20th century, election day ballot collection was near uniform practice with only a few late-arriving exceptions. And they were accepted! Before the Civil War, nearly all voting occurred in person at polling places, so election day was ipso facto the day on which poll workers collected all the ballots. But again, that doesn't mean anything else should be prohibited. This practice did not falter when the cannons rang out on Fort Sumter. Even when the Civil War took soldiers hundreds of miles from their usual polling places, Election Day still meant ballot collection day. States took different approaches to ensure that their soldiers could vote while away. Some states allowed soldiers to mail their ballots back home, either directly to local officials or to proxies who would cast them at the polls. Others sent commissioners to soldiers' camps to distribute absentee ballots, collect them, and then to deliver them to the officials in each soldier's hometown. But again, you're doing them not on Election Day, but before Election Day, going against your own legal argument. Let's see. He says in his footnote, the majority questions whether it is defensible to treat ballots in field voting regimes as received as soon as the military officers collect them on Election Day, especially since some states did not formally deputize officers as election officials. Such officers were deputized, however, these officials, blah, blah, blah. We're skipping that part. Likewise, although post-election day deadlines have become more widespread in the last 5 decades, these developments post-date the last election day statute by over 50 years and the first statute by over a century. These late-in-time practices therefore count for little when discerning the timing restrictions. They should count for a lot because, again, things change. Hairstyles change. Interest rates fluctuate. In sum, from this nation's founding until the last few decades of the 20th century, a period that spans the enactment of all 3 Election Day statutes, having an election on a particular day meant completing ballot collection by that day. Again, no, you're still moving your goalposts. Majority brushes aside this impressive historical record. Only you think it's impressive, apparently, or maybe you and Thomas and the other one that, said no. Because the respondents have not offered direct evidence that state actors believe that federal law required these often burdensome procedures and timelines. For all we know, the majority reasons the state might have insisted on receiving ballots by Election Day for their own independent reasons. This argument withers on examination, blah, blah, blah. We're just going to skip a little bit because this is getting a little bit too repetitive on him doing appeals to tradition and him being hypocritical and contradicting himself over and over and over again. Perhaps the majority is looking for legislative floor statements or committee reports saying we would really like to give the boys in the field some extra time for the ballots to arrive. But the Presidential Election Act of 1845 prohibits us from doing so, blah, blah, blah. The majority separately worries that using historical practice to interpret the phrase election night trap states' election practices in amber, but policy of collecting all ballots by Election Day is entirely consistent. Again, except if you ignore the last few decades where we have done so. And again, there's nothing in the federal law that prohibits it, so therefore, and that's one of the problems with the SAVE Act, is it's now going to prohibit it. Moreover, the majority's worries are exaggerated. All agree that relevant provisions in the Election Day statutes regulate only the time of the election, which again, time you cast your ballot, not the time it's received. Having considered text, legal context, and historical practice, I turn to precedent. Ha ha! You're a hypocrite! You turn to precedent! You ignore precedent when it's convenient to you, Justice Alito. Again, the worst Supreme Court justice in the history of our court. Although few judicial decisions interpret the Election Day statutes, those precedents favor the respondent's position. Most on point is the Supreme Court of Montana's. Again, the Supreme Court of Montana is not the federal Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Montana was dealing with Montana law, not with constitutional law. So you're using a Montana Supreme Court to justify your own. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd that he would use the Supreme Court of a state to guide his federal Supreme Court. The federal Supreme Court is supreme to all other courts of the land. That's why it's called the Supreme Court of the United States. I'm going to have fun with that one. So, yada, yada, yada. The majority's remaining arguments are patently insufficient, according to Alito, but obviously the five of them, the majority of them disagree that it's patently insufficient. First, the majority notes that several provisions of the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act of 1986 cross-reference state law deadlines for ballot receipt. The majority text next invokes the interpretive canon that counsels in favor of reading statutes in a way that accommodates later legislative enactments, what the lawmakers must have had in mind, but rather advances the normative value of blah, 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 more of his bullshit. He says the argument falters, which of course, to him it falters, and to the dissent it falters, but to the majority it didn't. So therefore, you're wrong, they're right. The majority holds that a state complies with federal election day statutes if it requires that ballots are postmarked by election day and received within 5 days. But this obsessively simple holding obfuscates the many unsettling questions that the majority position entails. Ooh, why are you unsettled, Justice Alito? Tell us all. For instance, do the federal election day statutes impose any ballot receipt deadlines? Mississippi counts absentee ballots that arrive up to 5 days late. Indeed, some states will count mail-in ballots that arrive as late as 21 days after Election Day. If the election is complete when voters fill out their ballots and send them in that way, may states eliminate ballot receipt deadlines entirely? No, because there are certain things that have to happen, like you have to have the results of the election submitted by a particular date, by other federal statutes and stuff like that. So therefore, no. But there are issues like that. For example, let's look at Louisiana's history, shall we? You know, most states decide who their congresspeople are by that day in November. Louisiana doesn't, or hadn't, and I think still doesn't. Louisiana doesn't. Why? Because Louisiana will hold Election Day. I think there's one example where that didn't happen, where they actually moved everything backwards. They had primaries early and had the general election on Election Day. But in most cases in Louisiana, when it comes to Congress, you have the Election Day in November, and if nobody makes 50% or more, then you go to a runoff, and the winner was determined in December. So therefore, the choice of the electorate for who is going to be their congressional representative was not determined on the beginning of November, but it was determined in December. So if that's okay, why is this not okay? There are clear examples. Louisiana can't be the only state in the nation where this happens, though I wouldn't be surprised to find out that Louisiana is a special snowflake. But when you have runoff elections, you had the runoff elections for Georgia. I can cite Georgia. Because you had the general election for who's going to be senator in Georgia back in 2020. And then John Ossoff was one of the ones that forced a runoff election. And that runoff election was held later, and the determination of who won those elections, guess what? That was determined by like January 5th or something like that. And the person was seated like the next day. So therefore, Raphael Warnock was the other one who also on the same day forced a runoff and then took the seat later. So clearly, even though the federal elections, the general elections are required to be held on that day, clearly there are multiple states that have a tradition of having a runoff that takes place afterwards, and the decision of who is going to represent that state in the Senate or in the congressional districts in question is not decided till well after Election Day, when another Election Day takes place for the runoff election, which completely destroys Justice Alito's argument. I challenge anybody who's watching this video to prove me otherwise. Prove to me why that argument doesn't make Alito's dissent fall apart. I mean, we all know why Alito's argument falls apart, because the majority of the Supreme Court also disagrees with Alito. So may states use something other than ballots postmarked to determine when someone voted? I mean, again, we vote for people after Election Day when there's a runoff election. So boom, there you go. That is the only proof you need right now that Alito's argument is both specious and bullshit. Finally, today's decision leaves open opportunities for voter fraud that may further undermine America's faith in the integrity of elections. Diverse sources have recognized that mail-in ballots increase the potential for fraud in 20... Oh my God, he is now pushing Trump's propaganda? Holy shit. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely... This is absolutely 100% absurd. Because the own committee chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and James Baker found that you can have adequate mail-in votes simply by having more protections. He is lying right here by only presenting the small little amount that Donald Trump brings up, which means he's just carrying the water for Donald Trump. He is not part of an independent judiciary that makes decisions by himself. He is he even appoint Donald Trump to the Supreme Court, and he's probably one of the most reliable people for Donald Trump to carry his water. And again, he's not citing anything in law. He's citing this one example of they said where you have to be careful, because it said you have to be careful to make sure fraud doesn't exist. But they also cited states where, that are uniformly mail-in ballots where voter fraud doesn't happen, and it happens much less. And more voter fraud happening than normal still is not a lot of voter fraud either. So the idea that we're opening the floodgates to voter fraud because we're allowing this to continue is bullshit. It's a slippery slope fallacy, if you will. Another fallacy that's less often used by Justice Alito, but still used just the same. It's not let's see, blah, 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 blah. Justice Stevens recognized that the risk of voter fraud perpetrated using absentee ballots is real and could affect the outcome of a close election. Some people who gave the amicus briefs in that case similarly explained that when voter fraud occurs these days, it generally takes place in the form of organized fraud, such as the use of fraudulent absentee or mail-in ballots. Of course, again, voter fraud is generally low, and we've seen examples, according to the Heritage Foundation, that show that voter fraud, ballot fraud, is infinitesimally small. It is tiny, and it is not accounted for any election going the different way. There's no evidence that shows that mail-in ballots or any sort of voter fraud has forced an election to be any election, or maybe one or two, if that. It's not difficult to understand why when someone votes by mail, it's harder for officials to verify their identity. The person, but again, here's the problem with this argument: is that yes, it may be difficult to cast a mail-in ballot, or to be able to check it. It may be a little more difficult to determine whether or not the mail-in ballot is cast correctly. However, the risk in casting one illegal mail-in ballot is not worth the reward of having that one mail-in ballot counted. In fact, there was a Republican guy who voted for his either dead wife or dead mother who was caught and now is in prison, I believe. Or he at least was punished for voting illegally. So again, they will likely catch you if you're committing an act of fraud while voting. They're going to catch you in the small instances. Again, because many criminals are dumb, and most people don't do it because the risk is not worth the reward. Today's decision compounds these vulnerabilities, allowing absentee ballots to pour in over days and weeks after Election Day, by which point preliminary election results are being publicly reported. Again, and if they know how many outstanding mail-in ballots there are, how many outstanding absentee ballots there are. We know this, and we know what percentage of was mailed out. So when somebody in the media is going to be reporting whether or not an election was projected to be won by a particular person or not, they're going to take things into consideration, like how many absentee ballots are they waiting for, and would that absentee ballot difference make any difference in the outcome of the election? And in some cases, the votes that are counted, that are continued to be counted, because some states don't allow you to even start counting until the polls close. If that's the case, then you're going to get a big swath of votes in that get counted. And so in some cases, that means that people get, sway. Like, for example, during COVID, you had more people who were on the left side voting absentee, voting by mail when they could, because it was safer to do so, while Republican MAGA type folks were out there, sniffing horse paste or whatever and trying to inject bleach or disinfectant or whatever into their skin while, go partying and going to vote in person. As Justice Kavanaugh has explained, when thousands of absentee ballots flow in after Election Day and potentially flip the result of an election, charges of a rigged election can explode. But charges of a rigged election is not proof of a rigged election. Just because Donald Trump whines and bitches and moans and complains about the fact that there is oh my God, there's so much fraud, stop the counting, it doesn't mean that he's telling the truth. In fact, he lies all the time. Likewise, it is not difficult to foresee the types of fraught situations like the counting of late mail-in ballots may lead to. Suppose the outcome. So now he's manufacturing some bullshit arguments. And a close presidential election hangs on the final vote in a state that allows officials to count mail-in ballots received until 2 days before the presidential electors must meet. And the supposed big hypothetical situation that's not going to happen because that's not the case today. Why are you trying to manufacture a situation that is never going to take place because no state does this? It's absurd. And then he expects that you're going to have some fraudulent activity. Again, it's not worth the risk. So he's basically, we need to get Justice Alito a tinfoil hat now, because he's basically been arguing as to whether or not this, what's going to happen, what might happen if all of these things line up in a row to create this horrible thing that will never happen. That's not how we should be making rulings in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should be making rulings on how things are and how they relate to the law and how they relate to the Constitution, not some hypothetical fantasy situation that's never going to happen. Again, yet another reason why Justice Alito is the dumbest Supreme Court justice in the history of the Supreme Court. I do apologize. Y'all feel like hanging around for a little more, or y'all had enough of this? Maybe we'll cover this more. Actually, in reality, actually, these last two are short. We're just going to do these last two that are short, simply because of the fact of this. The main reason I wanted to look at this particular one, Donald Trump v. Cook. Donald Trump v. Cook is one of the ones that was today that basically said that Donald Trump cannot fire Lisa Cook from the Board of Governors because it didn't follow the rules. Justice Thomas dissenting. Now, I want you to be very careful. Look very carefully here on this screen. So here is the start of the dissent. This is not Alito's dissent, but Thomas's dissent. Actually, let me start recording. We're talking about, in this case, Lisa Cook, and the case that basically said that Donald Trump could not fire her, or could not fire her in the manner in which she was fired. Still go through the other things, but one thing I wanted to point out about how ridiculous this is not about Alito, but it's about Clarence Thomas. So if you look here, this is a concurring opinion right here. So all of the people who agree with the ruling, i.e. the majority decision and the concurring opinions, stop here. And if you look at, Justice Jackson is 1, 2, 3.5 pages long. That's how long Justice Jackson and her concurring opinion is. We're now on page 40. Page 40 of 83. So these entire 40 pages make up the entirety of the majority opinion and the concurring opinions. Clarence Thomas starts here. Justice Alito's dissent starts on page 73. So again, page 40, from here's where the little slider bar is where he starts his rambling. page 73 is where Alito starts and Gorsuch joins. So the last 10 pages. So Thomas rambled on for how many pages? 33 pages of rambling on ridiculousness on over something that's just about a stay. It's an application for a stay. Like, the lower court put an injunction on the firing, and the Supreme Court, in the majority, decided that they're not going to have a stay on that injunction to allow the firing to continue. Clarence Thomas spent 33 pages arguing why you don't need to have a stay. Or you should have had a stay. You should have stayed the argument. Alito's like, it presents many thorny legal questions. What's the substance for cause? Yada, yada, yada. Some of these questions present issues of first impression, and many lack obvious answers. More important, lower courts in this case have passed on very few of these issues, blah, 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 and have done so in a preliminary and rushed fashion. We often say we're the preliminary or the court of review and not a first view. What is before us is simply an application for stay pending appeal, and the court should have granted or denied that application in a brief order last fall. The nascency of this lawsuit and the novelty of the issues it presents militated against holding oral arguments and issuing a comprehensive opinion at this juncture, rather than resolving several challenging and underdeveloped issues at this early stage of litigation. I would decide this application solely on the two issues that the district court addressed, and because the district court resolved those issues incorrectly, I respectfully dissent from the court's denial of a stay, or whatever. So I got it backwards, or whatever. Yeah, I got it right. Denial of a stay. The court denied the stay. Alito wanted to put a stay on the district court's stopping of the firing, I guess. So, anyway, a lot of babbling. Again, another 10 pages of rambling on as to whether or not there should be a stay. I will grant the application because within the narrow confines of this case posture, the president has satisfied the traditional stay factors. Yada, yada, yada. Obviously, the majority, though, disagrees with you. And again, you're one of the dumbest Supreme Court justices in the history of the Supreme Court. So as such, why would I believe that you are smarter than the other people who voted to put a stay on the lower court's injunction? He respectfully dissents. And again, 78 of 83, so there's more pages after this. Oh, this is Justice Barrett's dissenting. So he didn't even ramble on. He'd only rambled on for five pages. And Barrett went on for another 5 pages, and Thomas went on for 30. I would never want to go through 30 pages of Clarence Thomas's ramblings. Just unless it was on a substantive issue, like, for example, Dobbs v. Jackson or, whatever. And that was just a concurrence where he rambled on because he talked about stuff that was irrelevant. But anyway, that's all we're going to talk about for this one on Justice Alito being the dumbest Supreme Court justice in the history of the Supreme Court. And then simply this last one, Trump versus Slaughter, is when the court, and this is not an Alito thing, this is just the Supreme Court. They basically said that Trump is allowed to fire anybody else ridiculously or whatever, because, giving Donald Trump the power that not even the courts that Alito likes to cite support. But Roberts delivered the opinion in court in which Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett joined, and in which Thomas joined, but all but part 3. Gorsuch filed a concurring opinion. Sotomayor dissented with Kagan and Jackson joining into the dissent. But Slaughter's view is incompatible with our constitutional design, although it is up to the Senate to decide whether to confirm those with whom the president would prefer to work. Neither Congress nor the courts may saddle him with those with whom he cannot work. Subordinates who exercise the president's power are subject to removal by him. Then and only then can they remain accountable to the president and the president to the people. And I would agree that should be true. That should be true, for example, with situations like, people who he appoints to be members of his staff, like his chief of staff, or maybe the people who are the head of, the Department of Justice. If he wants to fire somebody who's the head of the Department of Justice, maybe he should be able to fire that person. But independent other organizations, other than the Federal Reserve, which we've already said, the Supreme Court said he can't do it in the way that he did it, at least. But when it comes to other entities, like what might be counted here or whatever, there should be a little bit more checks and balances. You shouldn't have carte blanche. You shouldn't be able to appoint somebody to a position like an expert and then just be able to swap them out just at a whim. So, Roxanne says, that about does it for me. Well, appreciate you being here. And of course, we're actually going to be saying that about does it for me as well, simply because of the fact that it's now 10:30 and I'm actually starting to get hungry now. So I'm going to have myself some food. Thank you to all of the 69 likes. Nice. We got 69 likes. Or that deserves oh my. But thank y'all for watching. Thank you to the 53 who continue to watch as well. Appreciate y'all. We're going to end the show as normal with a couple of songs. And I don't have to, actually close. I don't have to actually close my I don't have to do this again to my camera or block the camera while the show ends because, again, we're on my new computer. So, again, thanks, everybody. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Go to liberaldanradio.com. Interact with lots of videos. Help the algorithm because algorithm needs more rhythm. Thank y'all very much. Have a great one until Wednesday night. Peace.
They wrote it in the laws, ink still bleeds, treating women like soil, just planting seeds. She's gone, brain dead, not even awake, but the state's got a claim, gonna plant its stake. Say it's God's will, say it's life they protect, but they ain't the ones feeling pain or neglect. From Texas to Georgia, they set the trap, rights roll back while they smile and clap. Gilead's here, this is true, hey MAGA fools, they'll come for you too. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. This ain't pro-life, it's control and shame. They don't care if she's gone, just playing a game. Keep her hooked to machines, cold and still, just a vessel to them, not a human with will. No consent, no voice, no chance to resist, just laws in place, written with a clenched fist. Hospitals scared, judges playing God, bodies ain't temples, just stay on pods. Gilead's here, this is true, hey MAGA fools, they'll come for you too. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. Vance in the dark, they don't care who it kills, sacking courts while they strip out all of your wills. But we'll fight back, march loud, burn bright, cause this ain't the end, it's the start of the fight. Gilead's here, ain't no grace, and those leopards are coming to eat your face. So I'm gonna jet, see you later. I'm not gonna be a baby incubator. Not gonna be a baby incubator. Not gonna be a baby incubator.
This just in. A sudden spike in logic levels across the city. Citizens report seeing a man with glasses and a podcast mic. We go now live to Liberal Dan. Who you gonna call when Nazi writings on the wall? Call your man Liberal Dan, cause you know we got a plan. The right wing talking shit, but he ain't about to quit. He'll take his proton pack and zap your logic cause it's whack. So who you gonna call when the writing's on the wall? Call your man Liberal Dan, and the rhetoric will fall.
It's being reported that Liberal Dan is setting up what appears to be some sort of straw man containment field.
Calling out your lies with his mic, he'll vaporize. Cross the streams in your dreams, bitch, you know that he's too wise. You're like Slimer talking crap, but you walked into his trap. Yo, it's more than entertainment, it's misinformation contained. So who you gonna call when the writing's on the wall? Call your man Liberal Dan, and the rhetoric will fall. The Statue of Liberty, the writing you can't see. So bring the huddled masses, it's a war of the classes. While Trump may think he's Vigo, Dan can cut through that ego. He's got the facts to prove him wrong, got that logic like Egon. Your logic is a ghost, cause you know this chick is toast. When you follow MTG, it's conspiracy, you'll see. There's no need to taser, he's got wit like Occam's razor. Liberal Dan cuts those lies with his Jewish-based laser.
It's unbelievable. Liberal Dan just used the literal dog whistle to lure a large group of internet trolls into what is being called a self-collapsing rhetoric singularity. In all my years of reporting, I've never seen anything like this.
So don't call to be a heckler, you ain't no Judge Rexler. He'll bust you like Scolary, cause your logic's looking hairy. Right-wing callers think they're cool, but they sounding just like Zool. You the dog, he the man, and yo, his name is Liberal Dan. So who you gonna call when the writing's on the wall? Call your man Liberal Dan, 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 and the rhetoric will fall. Liberal Dan, Liberal Dan, Liberal Dan.
Obama and Bush's pictures got hidden, obscuring the past, history rewritten. Hung in a hallway where no tour can see, confirming his unending fragility. If Trump can't see it, you must not exist. That also includes the Epstein list. Object permanent, a milestone missed. If Trump can't see it, he must not exist. The testing was the line that he said. Hundreds of thousands needlessly dead. Now HHS is run by brainworm quack, hiding the truth behind his back. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. That also includes the Epstein list. An administration run by narcissists. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. Documents stacked floor to the wall, top secret folders in a bathroom stall. Charges were pressed, but the case was dropped. A corrupt judicial system he can co-opt. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. That also includes the Epstein list. He'll swear it's fake news, a liberal twist. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. Campus downtown, tents lining the street. Invisible people that power won't beat. Hide them away so the cameras can't find it. Proof of a system that's cold and unkind. A chaotic secret, an NDA sign, an illegal bribe. Michael Cohen fine. Trump got fined too over his gag order, but she didn't gag, cause he was much shorter. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. That also includes the Epstein list. We can't let him win, we must resist. If Trump can't see it, it must not exist. Out of the blue, liberal Dan got some bitter things.
Gather round everyone and I'll tell you a tale about an orange-faced buffoon who should be in a jail. When people say he's done something that goes beyond the pale, he will shake his head and give this answer without fail. A hoax, he says it's all a hoax. When at a press conference or with misspelled keystrokes, he says he tells no lies and that he never jokes. Confronting with the truth, he'll say it's all a hoax. A modern Don Quixote, he hates the windmills, claiming to protect the birds and whales. He says attractions like real sugar and cokes. Confronting with the truth, you'll say it's all a hoax. You promised to